These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they are described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. I had a bad trip, and now I don't know what to do. My boyfriend, Johnny, and I are planning on doing shrooms tonight. We stopped by the local gas station and grabbed some candy, off-brand sour rainbow strips, to help the shrooms go down easier. Once we were back at our place, we waited until the sun went down and got ready to have some fun. We didn't have high hopes, well, not that we were really experienced anyway. But since our usual hookup had moved away, we didn't know what to expect. Johnny ended up running into a strange guy at the bar while he was outside smoking a cigarette. The stranger bummed one off of him, then just offered them right up. Normally, I would never take drugs from a stranger, but we've had a rough time lately, and I'd do anything to catch a break. We are off to a good start, as I am not nearly as nauseous as usual after taking them. Johnny and I snuggle up on the couch to watch Trolls. A half hour later or so, he jumps up and says he wants to look at the stars. He swings the door open, right as I start to shout to remember the cat. Lately, our void cat, Freja, has been unusually skittish, spending hours under the bed, twitching at every sound, and trying to escape any chance she gets. I keep reminding Johnny to watch out for her when he opens the door, or go out the back if he can. We have a screen on our patio. And of course, he always forgets. When he opens the door, I spot Freja's tail peeking out from underneath the coffee table, 2 feet away from our front door. She darts out. How many times do I have to tell you to watch out for her? I rush after her, down our apartment stairs, but she's nowhere to be seen. So what, I can't open the door to my own place? He follows behind me a few moments later. She's a cat, she'll find her way back. Calm down. You don't know that. All I did was ask you to be more careful, I cry to him. Just help me look for her. Are you serious? We just took shrooms. We can look in the morning. This is where I might have messed up, but really, I didn't know what else to do. She's my baby, and I know I couldn't just sit at home and wait for her. What if something bad happened? I run upstairs, grab a bag of treats, and throw on a jacket. Well, I'm going to look. I shut the door a little too hard behind me. I walk around our apartment, looking beneath bushes and calling out her name. After 30 minutes or so, the air begins to grow thick and hot. The edges of my vision start to cave in, the light draining from everything around me. It was like a mask had been pulled over my eyes, with a dark vignette closing in, blurring everything but the center. Shit. The shrooms were starting to kick in. I tell myself that this is my journey. Freja and I are connected, I would find her, and everything would be fine. Just then, a tiny black shadow darted into a nearby hallway. Freja! It's Mommy! I sprint after her. As I turn the corner, I stop abruptly. So abruptly that I nearly tripped onto the concrete. The hallway is pitch black, void of color or shape. I can't make out a thing. Worse still is the cold dread curling in my gut, my stomach twisting, begging me to turn back. Just as I am trying to convince myself I'm just tripping, there is nothing to worry about. I've been down this hallway plenty of times. I hear her meow. This is my journey. I need to be brave for her, be her protector. I force my feet forward. Another meow comes from down the void of a hole, a bit louder now. Come here, sweetie, I call out with a shaky voice. 2 big, unblinking eyes stare at me, not so far away. Not too much longer and we'll be together again. I can't believe Johnny wouldn't help me. You know what? I don't need him. I fumble in the pitch darkness, feeling around to open the treat bag, slowly approaching her. I look down for a moment, my eyes beginning to adjust. I could just make out the edges of the bag, and then I run into something. I fall hard onto my ass and look up. A figure looms over me. It's a man, at least I think it's a man. I can see the white slits of his eyes, hear his breathing. He's smiling at me. The whites of his teeth stretch unnaturally wide, twisting his face into something almost inhuman. My vision warps, the world bending with his endless, stretching smile. I sit frozen, shock pinning me in place. Grasping for any rational thought, I try to shake it off, but time warps alongside his grin. My sense of time is completely gone now. I'm just sitting here, looking like an idiot. Maybe he's trying to help me, or maybe he's just laughing at the girl tweaking at 2 a.m. Then a different set of rational thoughts sinks in. I don't know this man's intentions. Shrooms or not, I don't need to be alone with a strange man in the middle of the night. I peel my eyes away from his stare to where Freja was sitting a moment before. She's still there, my little angel. As soon as she realizes my attention, she starts meowing again, a long, desperate whine that I've never heard before. As she whines, the man begins bending towards me. His face twists and warps, eyes bulging, cheeks sinking in grotesquely. That disgusting smile still stretched across his face. He sinks lower, begins bending over me. I remind myself that I need to protect Freja, and so I push him. He felt so cold and wet, I felt so hot that I thought I was going to pass out. Forcing everything else out of my mind, I jump to my feet and chase after Freja. Even if I can't catch her, I can at least get both of us away from this strange man. She scurries around the corner, and I follow after her. As we corner the hallway, I can finally see clearly again. The moon is bright, and several of my neighbors still have their porch lights on. She heads straight for our apartment. As we reach the steps, I take one moment to look behind us. A building over, there's a man crouched behind the bushes, staring at me. Pale and hollow-eyed, he wore a sinister grin that stretched over half his face. Nausea surges through me. I'm going to puke. As fast as I can, I follow her up to our front door and lock it behind me. Johnny. No answer. No one in the living room, no one in the kitchen, and no one in the bedroom. He's gone. I dig my phone from my pocket and scroll through the notifications. A text from Johnny, meeting up with a friend at the bar. These shrooms are duds. I try calling him, straight to voicemail. Do I call 911? What the fuck do I do? My heart is pounding so hard I can barely breathe. Freja hisses and runs towards our bedroom. I look up to see the man, face pressed against our patio door, still grinning. Story 2. I work night security at an abandoned water park. Someone keeps turning the slides on. People always ask why an abandoned place would need security. Let me explain. If something burns down, the city pays for it. If someone gets hurt trespassing, lawsuits happen. If a kid falls off a broken ride, there's an investigation. And places like this, Half Moon Waterslide Park, are a magnet for dumb teenagers and TikTok explorers. So yeah, they hire guys like me. Low pay, long hours, and a flashlight that barely works. But at least it was boring. Until last Tuesday. The park's been shut down since 2009. Some kid went missing during a night event and they never found him. The whole place went bankrupt a few months later. Nobody touched it after that. No buyers. No demolition. Just sat there rotting in the dark. The slides are still up. Giant, twisting tubes of faded plastic that creak in the wind. The wave pool is a dry crater. And the main tower, the tall one with the 6-story drop slide, is chained shut. Tuesday night, I was doing my first round. 11:47 p.m. I always walk the same path. Entrance gate, locker rooms, food court, slides, tower. Everything was normal until I got to the slides. Then I heard it. Water. Flowing. Splashing. Rushing. I froze. Pulled out my flashlight. The lazy river was running. Except there was no water in that thing. Not anymore. Just cracked cement and a few raccoon bones. And yet, I could hear it. Rushing past me. Echoing down the path that I walked over to the control hut. The power box was open. The main switch was on. That shouldn't be possible. The park's been cut off from the grid for years. There's no power. And still, the intercom crackled to life. A distorted voice whispered, "All riders, remain seated with your arms inside the raft." I turned the switch off. The sound stopped. I told myself it was a shorted wire. Echoes. Maybe I was just tired. Until the next night. I arrived at 10:58. Early. Thought I'd check the cameras before heading out. We only have 6 working ones, all black and white, all grainy as hell. They're more for show than anything else. Camera 2, pointed at the base of the main slide tower, was showing movement. A figure. Walking in slow circles around the tower. I zoomed in. No detail. Just a shape. Slender. Lopsided. Almost like it was leaning to one side. I watched for 5 minutes. It didn't leave. It didn't stop. Just kept walking. When I finally got outside, it was gone. But the chain on the tower door was broken. Snapped like someone had cut it with bolt cutters. I didn't sleep that day. Wednesday night, I brought a bat. No cameras showed movement, so I walked the whole park twice. When I passed the tower, the door cracked open. I didn't go in. But I heard something coming from inside. Not footsteps. Not voices. Breathing. What? Too loud to be human. I ran. Thursday, my boss texted. Notice anything weird on shift? Slide tower lights are on. Pretty sure the building doesn't even have lights. He attached a photo. Taken from a highway dashcam, apparently. The tower windows were glowing yellow. Like floodlights were on inside. That night, I didn't do rounds. I stayed in the security shack, door locked, bat in hand. At 2:31 a.m., every monitor turned to static. Except one. Camera 6. Entrance to the wave pool. It showed a boy. Soaking wet. Standing motionless at the pool's edge. Staring straight into the lens. He didn't blink. He didn't move. And when I checked the pool 10 minutes later, there were wet footprints leading toward the tower. Friday I quit. Told myself I didn't need the money that bad. Told my boss I saw someone break in and refused to risk my life. He didn't fight me on it. But then last night I got an email. No sender. Just a video file. 30 seconds long. It was security footage from the night the park shut down. You can hear kids screaming. Not fun. In panic. Then the footage cuts to the main slide, just as something crawls out of it. It isn't clear. Too much static. But it's too big. And it moves wrong. I tried to delete it, but the file keeps coming back. Every time I open my laptop now, the slides start playing. They tore the tower down this morning. Some kind of incident. Police tape everywhere. I drove by on the way to my brother's. The foundation's gone. Flattened. But the slide is still there. Just one tube. Standing straight up like a straw in the dirt. And water is pouring out of it. Constant. Endless. No pipes. No tank. Just falling from somewhere above. From nowhere at all. Story 3. I got caught in a library in a storm. It started raining torrentially a few minutes after we'd arrived. I grabbed my 5-year-old and raced across the parking lot, getting halfway drenched. We made our way downstairs to the children's library. It was empty except for the librarian sitting behind the desk, reading a book. Sorry, I said as we dripped water everywhere. No worries. Stay as long as you need. We walked over to a table. Since we were the only ones here, I took off our wet shoes and socks, and used my hoodie to towel dry Jack's hair. Unfortunately, I didn't have a change of shirt or anything, but Jack seemed fine. He ran over to the Lego table, smiling. I'd planned to just make a pit stop, but I guess we were going to be stuck here for a while. No way I was going to drive in that mess. I pulled out my phone and began to scroll. Rain pelted down, dripping down the glass of the narrow windows near the ceiling. From what little I could see, the parking lot was a gigantic puddle. A flash of lightning, a peal of thunder, and then the lights flickered. We have a backup generator, but I'm not sure it's on, the librarian said, looking up at the ceiling. Let me go check. She hurried out of the room, and then it was just the two of us. I want to get another Pete the Cat book, Jack announced suddenly. Do you want me to come with you? Remember where they are. Yeah. I smiled as he ran off towards the bookshelves. Listened to his little pattering footsteps. Then I heard him gasp, and that made me fall off my chair. Jack? Mama, he said, running back to me, with a mischievous grin on his face. Mama, there's another person. He pointed back towards the aisles. I froze. I hadn't heard anyone else. Whoever was back there, Were they being quiet on purpose? Not quiet, absolutely silent. Who's back there? I whispered, picturing some creepy older guy flattened against the shelves, watching us. But Jack replied, "A little girl." I let out a sigh of relief. Then I followed him back to the aisles. He was right. There was a little girl standing there in front of the books. I couldn't quite see her face from this angle. It was hidden behind her mass of unkempt brown hair. She held a book open in her hands and appeared to be reading, swaying slightly to and fro. I glanced around the library. As far as I could tell, her mom, or dad, wasn't down here. They must be upstairs. She looked kind of young to leave all by herself. She was a little bigger than my son, maybe 6. "Do you need help?" I asked. The girl didn't turn around or respond in any way. Maybe she's deaf," Jack said. I mean, that was possible. But it was more likely she was just really absorbed in her book. "Come on," I said. Her parents were upstairs for a minute, and I wasn't going to interrupt a reading child. But the minutes crept on, and no one else came into the library. Not even the librarian, who was supposed to be checking on the generator. The lights flickered a second time, and then a third. Rain drummed on the windows. Fingers of lightning shot across the sky. Just as I was thinking maybe I should check on the girl again, the lights flickered and went out. Jack immediately started to cry. I closed the 3 feet of space between us and hugged him. It's okay," I said, turning my phone's flashlight on with my free hand. "It's okay. What about the girl?" I hadn't heard her cry. Oh no, she must be so scared, in the dark down here without her parents. I got up, sweeping my flashlight across the shelves. She was standing right there, peering out at us from behind the bookshelf. As soon as the flashlight swept over her, she darted back behind the shelf. "Hey, it's okay," I called out. "I'll help you find your parents upstairs. Come on, we'll all go together." Nothing happened. Maybe this was why her parents felt they could leave her alone. She was really good about stranger danger. I know I'm a stranger, but I have a kid too. See? Say hi, Jack. He said hi, somewhat reluctantly. "We'll go find your parents upstairs, the 3 of us." "Okay." Silence. Where the hell was that librarian? If she were here, she could probably phone upstairs, or bring the parents down or something. Holding Jack's hand, I ventured into the aisles. The first aisle was empty. The second one was too. The third. She was standing at the end of the aisle, perfectly still, her back turned to us. All I could see was that wild, messy hair. "I promise we're good people," I called out. "I'll help you find your parents." Lightning flickered through the windows. "Will you please just come upstairs with us?" Thunder rumbled. Maybe she was deaf. Or nonverbal. Still, there was a horrible feeling in my gut now, that something about this was really, really wrong. No one would leave her down here for so long. The parents would come running as soon as the power went out. Where's the librarian? You know what? This is not my fucking problem, I decided finally. I will go upstairs, and I will tell the librarians there is an unattended child downstairs. They can find the parents, or call the police, or do whatever they have to. I turned around with Jack and started walking towards the door. A scuffling sound behind me. It sounded like slow, deliberate footsteps, but they were dragging their feet. I whipped around to see that the girl was walking towards us. Walking backwards, still facing away from us. She was wearing shoes that were far too big for her. I grabbed Jack's hand and yanked him towards the library door, running as fast as I possibly could. The door slammed shut in our faces. I grabbed the knob, twisted and pulled. It wouldn't open. "Hey!" I screamed. "Let us out." I slapped my palms against the door, the entire frame rattling. Jack began to cry. I scooped him up and, holding him with one arm, tried the knob again. My phone's flashlight flickered. I whipped around to see the little girl standing behind us. She was facing the right way now. But her eyes were just darkened pits of nothing. "Where are my shoes?" she said, in a monotonous voice that almost sounded like a recording. "Where are my shoes?" I could hear her getting closer. But I didn't dare look. Where are my shoes? Mama, Jack cried. Where are my shoes? Where are my shoes? Let us out. Where are my shoes? Where are my shoes? A hand clawed at my arm. Over there. I screamed suddenly, pointing back towards where we'd left our shoes, wet from the rain. A second of silence. And then the lights flickered back on. The doorknob turned under my fingers. I burst out into the hallway, screaming. I ran up the stairs and didn't stop. There were no parents upstairs. The librarian who'd abandoned us was on the phone, trying to troubleshoot the generator. When I told her about the girl, they came down and looked for her everywhere. They didn't find her, or my son's shoes. Instead, there was a pair of tattered old women's flats sitting right next to the library door. Those and the bleeding scratches on my arm were the only evidence she'd even been there at all. The librarians didn't tell me anything, but through hours of internet research, I finally found it. An obituary. A little girl had died in the library about a decade before. The obituary didn't give details about the death, but it did give details about her. She was neurodivergent, nonverbal, loved to read, and absolutely hated being barefoot. This kind of gave me warm fuzzies for a minute, until I came across the second obituary. 6 years ago, an older woman died in town. She hadn't died in the library. Not exactly. She died from a horrible infection that had developed after she'd sustained deep cuts on her arms. After she visited the library had promised to revisit safety practices and sanitize all surfaces, but I had a horrible feeling that wasn't going to work. I looked down at my own cuts, pulsing with pain. She didn't mean to. She was in survival mode, fight or flight, focused on the fact that she needed shoes. But what was going to happen to me? Story 4. I work as a clown for a carnival in the middle of the desert. There is a man who clings to my ceiling and watches me as I sleep. His limbs are smooth and gray with an ash-like quality. His skin reminds me of the wings of a moth. He has no mouth, nose, or ears. He only has eyes, twice as big as a normal human's. They do not blink, but they shimmer like moons reflected in rain puddles. I don't know why he's there. There must be some reason why he takes some interest in me. I wish I could understand it. He's not always stationary. Occasionally, he'll sit on the edge of my bed while I take off my makeup. Once, he even cocked his head to the side, as if taking note of the curious ritual that is my nightly death. I do indeed die every night when I take off my face. I am born again in the morning, though I think born is too small a word. It's much more like a cruel reincarnation that I'm forced to go through every time the velour and silks fall off my body. My hat and nose are kept on my vanity like icons or patron saints, though I feel no comfort placing them there. It's not where they belong. I wonder if the faceless man knows these are my thoughts. I don't know. I've never bothered asking. He never bothers asking me anything, and it's my room, anyhow. When I lie down in my cotton sheets and old down pillow, ready for burial under the cover of night, there is no one to place coins on my eyes for the ferryman. I am left to languish in a dreamless purgatory. No Hermes or Valkyrie leads me to death. No force pulls me from the bardo. I am left to wait in the tomb with my visitor looking down on me. Perhaps his eyes are the only coins I'll receive. Perhaps he'll come down one day and place them upon my own. I've decided to name him Gooby. I do not like instant coffee. It's disingenuous and tastes like burnt butter. That said, I drink it every morning. This is for several reasons, the least of which is that a singular mug appears on my end table daily, bearing the inscription, "Clowning around." The other reasons are personal and have to do with love languages, such as gift-giving, and my general laziness in preparing anything else to drink. I think Gooby prepared it for me. I don't know. I didn't see him sitting on the edge of my bed that morning, so I imagine he's off doing something. Maybe he crochets. I wonder if he'd make me a hat. As I take my first sip of coffee and let its bitter warmth infest my veins, I stare at myself in the mirror and feel my blood run cold. This happens every morning without fail, and it never ceases to terrify me to my core. It is the kind of petrifying fear that you only get when noticing a figure at the corner of your vision. A stranger is watching me through the glass, drinking instant coffee out of a mug labeled Noire Ninwalsi. I don't recognize his face. I have a medical condition. Probably should have mentioned that, but better late than never. Doctors say it's something similar to depersonalization derealization disorder, but it's not quite that. You typically feel like you're in a dreamlike state with DPDR, and everything is supposed to move more slowly. I don't feel like I'm in a dream at all. Everything moves the same. Everything feels so vivid and focused that I sometimes almost vomit from motion sickness. No, I feel like I'm awake, aware, and painfully receptive to the horrible things of my reality. It's just my face. I never recognize my face. It's never the same to me. I can't tell if it switches forms or if my memory is simply that bad, but I am never at ease with it. My makeup is the only thing that calms me down. I start my ritual the same every morning. First is the white makeup, the canvas, the blank slate from which I carve my visage. Then comes the black, void, deeper than night and shadow, festering like a ripe spawn of the depths. Then I draw a little shamrock on my cheek because I like green. Finally, I force on my red eyebrows and smile. I apply enough powder to last through a hurricane, and finally, I'm ready to go. I step out of my trailer and into the desert that I call home. What I stated in the title is true. I reside in a permanent carnival fixture that rests on the side of a near-endless stretch of highway in the middle of the desert. I have no idea what state I'm in, nor if I'm even in America. What I do know is that any mail I get is completely unmarked, save for my name, and it always appears at the doorstep of my trailer every week, anchored under a rock. I'm fairly certain the boss reads my mail, which is why my name is always misspelled on the envelope, but I don't care. I cook for myself, clean up after myself, and live alone in a trailer that I'm almost certain used to be a drug den. I cleaned it up, got rid of all the stains in the carpet, and now it is mine. I do find the occasional needle or bone every once in a while, but no home is perfect, especially around here. I'm not completely devoid of supplies, of course. There is a gas station about a mile down the road run by an elderly couple who swear I'm not the strangest thing they've seen walking into their doors at night. I am apparently the friendliest, which is worrying in its own regard. I use them to stock up on basic groceries and toiletries to get by, which is convenient considering that my pay is what many would consider abysmal. That said, in the instance that the boss sees this and decides to dock me for complaining, I am joking. I don't have much I need to buy anyway, and, scary as it may be, delivery services do still work out here. But that is my existence and one that I am stuck with. I have a gigantic orange tricycle that I ride when I don't want to walk, and a comfy set of size 20 shoes that get me the rest of the way. All in all, it's a steady job, but one I find taxing on the best days. I'll summarize it like this: I am a clown who does not talk. I never talk. I'm half convinced I can't, but even if I wanted to try, it wouldn't be with the people around here. Most of my coworkers are fine people as they are, but sometimes the scarier things come in the form of the guests. One of my talents is balloon animals. I can make almost anything proficiently. Sometimes I'll get the occasional person who wants to try and challenge me, and they'll try to order off the menu I carry around with my balloon bag. Many times, they're innocent enough. Several children want their favorite cartoon characters, or Tommy guns, or insert exotic animal here, but on occasion, the requests can get a tad morbid. Today, I remember one corpulent little boy stopping me on my way to clean out the petting zoo to make such a request. "Can you make a spine?" he asked me. I stared at him for a second before raising my question mark sign. "You know," he repeated, "a spine? Like what's in your back?" The stare continued as a couple in matching Hawaiian shirts walked up behind him. They were assumed to be his parents, but they did not attempt to dissuade him. "Carter," said the woman in a distinctly shrill Minnesota accent, "don't be silly." "Carter, you know better," said the man with an almost shriller accent. "You have to be more specific. What kind of spine?" "Oh," the boy said with a wide smile. "Duh. Sorry, Mr. Clown. Can I have a human spine, please?" I kept the question mark signed up. "Oh, it doesn't have to have a skull attached," the man laughed. "Sorry for the confusion. Just the spine itself would be nice for the boy." "Oh, maybe a pelvis," the woman added. "Good eating on one of those. Could you do that, Mr. Clown?" By this point, I had retrieved my whiteboard and expo marker to try and write out a more sophisticated response, but the woman cut me off. "You know," she said, reaching into her beach bag, "kinda like this?" Out of the bag, she proceeded to pull out a yellow spine, at least a meter in length. It was old, though not dusty, and had several gnarled splinters coming off of its vertebrae. I was hesitant to ask where she'd gotten it, but the man spoke up next to her. "Oh, would you look at that, hon?" he said, all sentimental. "That's from our first road trip, innit? What was his name?" "Joe." "No, wasn't it? Hank." "Dillian," said the boy. "You told me about that one." The boy's father ruffled his shaggy hair as he adjusted his sunglasses. "That's it. Look at the kid on this brain, huh? So mindful." "He sure is," the woman said. "That trip was before you were even born." "Ah, good memories." "Good memories," the father looked back at me with a smile. "So what do you say, Mr. Clown? Spines sound good?" He held out a 20, and if I were a prouder man, I would have been more apprehensive at taking it. But a 20 is a 20. I made the best spine I could, using every shade of white and bone yellow I could think of, and in less than a minute, the boy was holding his latex prize and beaming like it was Christmas. The parents thanked me and parted ways, and I can't recall seeing them the rest of the day. I went about my normal route through the petting zoo, the Ferris wheel, the Hall of Mirrors, etc., and it wasn't until this evening that I heard of anything wrong. A sheriff's deputy was at the gates by 6 o'clock and was speaking sternly with the head manager. The manager, Bill, an older man who always wore a striped jacket and straw boater hat, was making every disarming gesture in the book as he conversed with the man. Eventually, the deputy left, and Bill locked the gates behind him. He passed by and gave a bright, "Evening, Bubbles," but I stopped him with my question sign. "Oh, that," he said, smiling, "it's nothing. Just something for the boss to handle." I gave the sign another shake. "Oh, Bubs," he said, checking over his shoulder before leaning in. "They're just looking for one of the teenagers from back in town. That's all." He straightened his bow tie. "You know, Bradley, who works the tickets at the Ferris wheel. His folks called the sheriff and said he was supposed to be home hours ago. Never did clock out, come to think of it. Well, I don't know. He only tore tickets for one family today, great tippers, by the way, and, well," he paused and held up his hands defensively. "I'm rambling. The point is, it's nothing for you to worry about. Go get some rest. We still have a few weeks until tourist season starts up again. Savor it all while you can." With that, he was off, and I was left feeling for the 20 in my pocket. There was nothing to be done. At the end of the day, there was no one to tell, and I didn't even have a name or vehicle to attach to any floating suspicions. Not to mention, it was getting late, and the gas station was at least half an hour away by trike, so I stowed my balloons, unlocked my ride from its fence post, and took off down the road. The gas station's glow was a flylight in the distance, and I was a moth with $20 to spend. Most children, on a long car ride, for whatever reason, imagine some kind of being that runs alongside them on the road. It's always moving at impossible speeds, keeping time with every stop, turn, and acceleration, pacing like a silent wolf through a deep bed of snow. I never had one of those as a child, but I do have one now, more or less. As I race my trike through the obsidian night, a single LED headlight gleaming, I sometimes see a pale figure, stark white and tall, bounding on the horizon towards the road. Sometimes, when I ride slower, I swear I can hear him howling. He seems urgent, panicked even, but I can't make out his face. He's a blip in the twilight of the desert. A single pale flame shimmering on the backdrop of a purple void. If I wait even longer, his mournful voice sounds familiar to me, but even then, I cannot recognize him. I've tried to name him, but nothing sticks. Chad didn't work. Didn't have the right mouth feel. Neither did Otis or Wheeler. He's such a simple-looking thing, and those are always the hardest to name. I've just started calling him that guy, and that works about as well as anything. He's always gone when I make it to the gas station, but he reappears on my rides back, still in the distance and still running. That guy is odd, for sure, but in all the years I've seen him, he's never done me a bad turn. His presence, even if unsettling, reminds me that I'm not alone on my nightly ride. I blew him a kiss tonight in a dramatic fashion before entering my trailer. His howling evaporated as my door slammed shut. I brought Gooby back some peanuts and left them on my dresser with a note saying they were his. I didn't really think about how he'd eat them, seeing as he has no mouth, but I figured it was the thought that counted. I performed my ritual and stared briefly at the stranger in the mirror before me, trying to take in any solid feature, but I couldn't. I shivered and went to bury myself in the covers of my bed, but was met by something unexpected. There, neatly folded on my pillow, was a crocheted cap with a tassel on the end. It was a handsome thing and only vaguely smelled of vinegar. I put on, and that was enough inspiration to get me to write this. Long post, I know, but hey, I have a new hat. I think it's rather nice of Gooby to do, and I wanted to brag about him. If he does anything else brag-worthy, I'll be sure to post again. In the meantime, wish me luck and pray to whatever you may believe that the gas station gets a new instant ramen flavor soon. I'm getting tired of shrimp. Thanks for reading this far. Also, on a separate note, if you meet a Midwestern couple in Hawaiian shirts, maybe try being somewhere else. Or make a balloon animal for them. Good night. Story 5. And Jesus wept. I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, although he be dead, shall live, and every one that liveth and believeth in me shall not die forever. John 11 verse 25. Each toll of the church bells was a year of my sister's life. The bells tolled 16 times in honor of her 16 years, which were as ephemeral as spring flowers. Although I was physically present, I was elsewhere in spirit during the Requiem, Massachusetts. Nothing, neither Father Simard's mournful voice, nor the marble floor, nor even the bells which rang the death of my sister, seemed real to me. Reality itself did not feel real. The casket, the unbleached candles, and the black-clad mourners all faded away. Even the choir, whose voices always made a strong impression on me, sounded distant and far off. May the angels lead you into paradise. May the martyrs receive you at your coming, and lead you into the holy city, Jerusalem. May the choir of angels receive you, and with Lazarus, who once was poor, may you have everlasting rest. All of it came crashing back as I felt a nudge of my aunt's elbow, announcing my sister's procession to our family plot in the adjacent cemetery. As 6 pallbearers lifted her casket onto their shoulders, I closed my eyes softly, tears trickling down my face. The procession was interrupted by a series of loud noises heard throughout the church. Opening my eyes, I saw the pallbearers had abandoned their posts, running away from the sanctuary while my mother screamed in horror. My father made the sign of the cross as he held her close to him, his mouth agape. What was going on? 3 more thuds drew an audible gasp from the congregation. Where were they coming from? Weaving my way through the congregation to the sanctuary, I discovered the noise's source, but I could hardly believe my eyes and ears. The noises were coming from inside the casket. "Dominique," my mother cried. "Stay away." Ignoring my mother's cries, I walked cautiously toward the casket until its lid abruptly opened. I came to a sudden stop as my sister, clothed in her favorite periwinkle blue dress, sat up in her casket. She was alive. "Chris." She turned her head toward me. "Nikki." There was a deafening silence as Christina maneuvered herself out of the casket, her kitten-heeled feet clacking on the marble floor of the sanctuary. Our father ran past me and embraced my sister, crying and laughing at the same time. He was followed by Dr. Desmarais, our family doctor, who tried with his ear to get a sense of her vitals. Yet Christina wrenched herself away from them, holding her hand over her nose as if she smelled a foul odor. "Christina? I can smell them," she said. Pointing to the congregation, she cried, "The stench of these wretched sinners." Not only the congregation, but the cure himself was shocked by her words. There was another gasp among the congregation as she collapsed into our father's arms. After my mother composed herself, she ran to my father and sister. She and Dr. Desmarais helped my father escort Christina out of the church to the hospital. Even after a battery of tests, Dr. Desmarais and his colleagues were unable to explain Christina's apparent resurrection from the dead. In defiance of natural law, she was not only alive, but she was in perfect health. Her asthma, which indirectly led to her death, was gone. She did not need her inhaler anymore. She was allowed to go home after 3 days of observation in hospital. At a loss for words, Dr. Desmarais and his colleagues could only describe what happened as nothing short of miraculous. It was not long before our home became a site of pilgrimage. The townspeople would ask my parents to see the risen Christina, which offended my pious mother's sensibilities. My father was more confused than appalled, but both of my parents agreed that Christina was not to be viewed as a tourist attraction. However, Christina chose to receive visitors, who beseeched her to tell them what awaited them after death, since she had been there and come back. She once spoke briefly of angels who accompanied her to meet their Lord. "The angels took me on their wings," Christina said. "They took me to the Lord. I saw him, face to face, surrounded by light. Not only was he beautiful, he was glorious. If you saw him only once in your life, you would willingly die to see him again." She never said more of her experience. Rumors spread about supposed supernatural signs of her holiness. She was found levitating during prayer by our mother, while she also displayed fluency in German, a language she did not know, to speak with a family of Swiss tourists who heard her story. When she spoke with them, she held a handkerchief to her nose, blaming the stench of an unforgiven sin on their souls. The family rebuffed her, claiming to be faithful Catholics, but Christina revealed the fact that their eldest daughter was born out of wedlock. The father blushed in embarrassment, while the mother fell to Christina's knees, holding onto her skirt, sobbing as she begged for her forgiveness. Placing her hands on the mother's head, she appeared to grant her absolution. Not once did Christina mention God. It was then that I began to have my suspicions about La Sainte de la Prairie. "Miss Boucher," Dr. Desmarais called. Rising from my seat, I walked with him back to his office. He sat in his chair opposite me. Sitting on his desk was a framed picture of his family in their Sunday best. "How are you, Miss Boucher?" "I'm doing well," I answered. "Please call me Dominique." "Dominique," Dr. Desmarais smiled. "Why did you come to see me?" "I wanted to speak with you about my sister." "Yes. How is she alive?" I asked. I know it wasn't able to be definitively determined, but I still don't understand. "It was nothing short of a miracle," Dr. Desmarais answered. "From God himself." "What?" "Your sister was raised from the dead by his hand," he said. "Like Lazarus." Was Dr. Desmarais himself a devotee of my sister? "But—" I started. "No, buts, Dominique," Dr. Desmarais interrupted. "Do you have no faith?" "Well, yes, I do, but—" I trailed off. "I can't make sense of it." "What do you mean?" Dr. Desmarais asked. "Don't you believe in miracles?" Realizing I would prevail nothing by seeking Dr. Desmarais' counsel, I pinned on a grin and I ended the conversation as soon as I possibly could. "I don't know," I answered. Lying through my teeth, I continued, "You said she was raised like Lazarus. Perhaps I should read the story of Lazarus again. It could help me through this crisis of faith." "It should," Dr. Desmarais beamed. "You will soon see that your sister is a living saint." "Yes, I believe I will," I replied. With a feigned sigh, I looked at the clock behind him and I said, "I apologize, but I should be going. Thank you for your time." "You're welcome," he said. "Please, give my regards to your family, especially Christina." "I will." Walking home from Dr. Desmarais' office, I saw the cure of our church greeting the parishioners at the end of Vespers. Believing I had nothing else to lose, I walked up the steps to the church and asked Father Samar if I could speak with him in his office. "I understand your skepticism, Dominique," Father Samar said. "I have to admit that I have had my own doubts about La Sainte de la Prairie." "Yes, but I want to believe, Father," I replied. "Shouldn't I?" "Not everything is worthy of belief," Father Samar emphasized. As St. John writes in his first epistle, "Believe not every spirit, but try the spirits if they be of God." "How?" "Prayer and scripture will be your sword and shield," he answered. "They will help you discern the fruits of your sister's labor." "Thank you, Father," I said. "I have to be going, but I'll reach out to you again if I have any further questions." "You're welcome, Dominique," Father Samar replied. "I'll do likewise." After I spoke with Father Samar, I walked home, where I found Christina praying in the den with the townspeople, wearing a new dress, an immaculate white dress, giving her the ethereality of an angel. She prayed the first half while the townspeople prayed the second half of the rosary. Having amassed a following, Christina started to pray with the townspeople on a regular basis. Despite their initial reservations, our parents slowly began to believe in Christina as the townspeople did, implicitly if not explicitly, and they embraced their status as the parents of the risen one. The local faithful declared Christina a saint, perhaps even a new savior. Miracles were also attributed to her intercession. Mrs. Karen, who was chronically ill, regained her health after Christina laid hands on her. Mr. Delisle, who was physically disabled, stood from his wheelchair as she led him by the hand. The youngest daughter of the Laberge family was cured of her epilepsy when Christina followed the example of Jesus Christ by rebuking the unclean spirit, which she said dwelled within the girl. All of them were devotees of my newly sainted sister. None of the healings attributed to her were authenticated by the church, but they contributed to her popularity regardless. My doubts continued to eat away at me. It came to the point that I finally had to consider what was almost unfathomable. Was it a lie? Whatever was going on with Christina was not of God. Or was it something more sinister? I did not know, but I was going to find out. On the following Saturday, I walked downstairs during Christina's daily prayers with her followers, which included the new addition of Father Samar. Why was he here? He and I exchanged a glance before he continued praying the rosary with the rest of Christina's followers. Walking into the nearly full den, I stood next to the cure, who surreptitiously handed me a folded piece of paper, which I hid in the palm of my hand. Returning to my bedroom, I unfolded the paper, which had a single line written on it. Matthew 24 verse 24. Grabbing the Bible from my bookshelf, I opened it to the Gospel of St. Matthew. Flipping to the 24th chapter, I was taken aback as I read the following verse. "For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall shew great signs and wonders, insomuch as to deceive even the elect." I was horrified. Was Christina a false prophet, if not even a false Christ? It was undeniable that she showed great signs and wonders, which enthralled the majority of the town. Could she be? I did not know what to think. Closing the Bible and returning it to my bookshelf, I walked back downstairs to speak with Father Samar, but he had left. Resolving myself to speak with him at church the next day, I spent the rest of Saturday in my bedroom, seeking solace in prayer and the scriptures, which he had said were my sword and shield. Was he right? While I hoped he was, I was not sure. Since I was the only member of my family to still attend Mass at the parish church, I left early in the morning, hoping to speak with Father Samar before Mass began. Walking up the steps to the church, I read an announcement in French on the large wooden doors. It revealed that the Archbishop in Montreal instructed the Bishop of our suffragan diocese to recall Father Antoine Samar to the Archdiocese for review of his conduct. A shiver ran down my spine as I thought of Father Samar's one and only appearance at our house the day prior. Did one of the townspeople see us? Perhaps they misunderstood. Or did Christina see us? I was alarmed by the possibility that Christina thought something was awry between Father Samar and myself, but even more so scared by the possibility that Christina knew anything at all about my conversations about her with him. After Mass was celebrated by the vicar of our parish church, I walked home, resolved to confront Christina about my doubts. It was time. Entering our house, I heard Christina upstairs in her bedroom, while our parents were nowhere to be found. Seizing the opportunity, I walked upstairs to my bedroom, where I retrieved my bottle of holy water and my rosary. In the hallway, I walked cautiously toward my sister's candlelit bedroom. She was changing into her white dress, accented with a garland of white flowers atop her long dark hair, while she softly sang a funereal hymn. Lord, all pitying, Jesus blessed, grant them thine eternal rest. Chris. With her back to me, Christina responded, Yes, Nikki? May I speak with you? Yes. Although my hands were trembling, I held the holy water bottle up in the air and sprinkled her with it as she turned around to face me. She appeared unaffected by the droplets of holy water trickling down her face like tears. Nevertheless, I grabbed her hand and pressed my rosary into her flesh, almost expecting it to burn her. "Nothing. What are you doing?" Christina asked. I was at a loss for words, but she giggled. "Did you expect me to burn Nikki?" "No," I stammered. "I failed. Like a witch at the stake?" I did not know what to do. Patting me on the shoulder, Christina walked past me. "I don't know what you expected to happen, Dominique, but I certainly wouldn't listen to that cur of a priest anymore." What? She came to a sudden stop as she held her hand to her mouth, an acknowledgement she made a mistake. While she displayed the gift of knowledge of events to which she was not privy, Christina never used that language against anyone, let alone Father Samar. The pretense was gone. "Who are you?" I demanded. Turning around to face me, Christina, with her now lackluster eyes, chuckled as she walked back to her vanity stand. "Who are you?" "I'm your sister," she cooed. "Can't you see me? Hear me? Come to me and I'll touch you." "You're not my sister," I rebuffed. "Whatever you are, let her go." She tried to touch me, but I wrenched myself away from her hand. "Let her go." Roaring back in response, Christina said, "She's already gone." There was a pregnant pause as I considered what I was told. "I don't understand." "You were never meant to understand." Christina trailed off. "Who are you?" I interrupted. "And where is my sister?" "She is burning in hell." I did not know whether or not to believe whatever was speaking to me through my sister's body. Could it be true? Yes, but why would it tell the truth now? It could be just another lie. Ultimately, I would never know, at least in this life. "Your sister never rose again," it hissed. "Your faith and theirs was in vain." Whatever inhabited Christina's body laughed, a cold, soulless laugh, as it turned toward the mirror on the vanity stand, looking intently at the flame of the candle. "Please," I begged, "bring her back." "That would be much too vulgar a display of power, Dominique," it answered. Holding its hands over the lit candle, it continued, "Perhaps I will go back instead. Join her in the fire." Before I was able to say anything, Christina plunged her hands onto the candle and burst into flames. Horrified, I held my hand over my mouth as she stood there, her flesh melting from her bones, while her demoniacal screams rang in my ears. Were they screams of pain? I covered her with a blanket from her bed to extinguish the fire. Or were they screams of pleasure? After the fire was put out, I took the blanket off of her, but she was no longer there. Nobody. No bones. No ash. There was nothing underneath the blanket except her dress, which was inexplicably as angelically white as it was before. Racked with sobs, I held on to her dress as I heard our parents enter the house. An all-encompassing fear washed over me. What should I do? I should pray for Christina. Yet all that came to mind was the sequence by the choir from her funeral, which sounded as distant and far off as ever. "May angels lead you into paradise." Wherever that is. Story 6. My body is a cavern, filled to the brim with writhing parasites. One little step. That's all it took when I think about it. Despite wearing heavy boots, a sharp pain shot up my leg from the bottom of my foot. It was quick, like getting jabbed by a needle. I winced, looking at where I had stepped along the riverbank with confusion, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. I must have misjudged my next step due to the pain because I ended up on my face less than a second later. "Miss," I heard, filled with concern. A few dozen feet in front of me was Marcus, our hiking guide. An older gentleman with silver hair and your typical adventurer's starter kit, greasy skin, khakis, a safari-style button-up, and an absolutely unbearable, can-do attitude that was hard to keep up with. "I'm all right," I shouted back, but he was already moving through the rest of the group toward me. I managed to get up and take another step, only for a similar pain to shoot back up through my foot. "Short break. Don't wander off too far," he shouted to the rest of the group, which promptly scattered, exploring the surrounding wilderness. The guide approached me and signaled for me to sit down on a nearby rock. "I'm okay, just lost my balance," I said as he knelt next to me and took out a small med kit from his hiking bag. "I believe you, miss," He took a second to look at my name tag, which every participant had created before the hike. Tara. That was still quite a fall. It's dangerous to continue without treating a wound like that. He took out a small alcohol wipe from the medkit and motioned for me to show him my arm. A sizable gash greeted the both of us. I hadn't even noticed. Oh, thanks. I guess it was. I watched as he patted the wound with the alcohol wipe, making sure to sufficiently clean the area of dirt and debris. He must have noticed how tense I was, as a look of concern never left his eyes. You know, we get a lot of different types of people out here, who come for a lot of different reasons. Marcus began to comfortably wrap my arm in gauze. He had clearly done this many times. Nature enthusiasts, trail buffs, spiritual types, the occasional lost soul looking to find themselves and whatnot. Grabbing a pair of medical scissors from his kit, he carefully cut the excess bandage and tied off a neat knot on my arm. I don't know what type you are, miss, but you look tense. There's no pressure or commitment. We meet every weekend, and you are always welcome. No need to force yourself. I nodded. It was a bit of a relief, knowing that my inevitable absence from this group was an expected outcome. Marcus extended his hand, which I took, getting ready to start moving again. Good to go. There's not much longer, so try and hang in there. He smiled. I finished the hike with a slight limp. The pain in my foot wasn't as intense as it was before, but it still made it a bit difficult to maneuver through the gravel path. I wasn't really one to do this sort of thing, hiking, that is. I was told a little nature would help with my generally sour disposition. It didn't. I hated types like our guide. It was difficult for me to navigate that kind of compassionate and outgoing attitude. The whole trip was full of corny jokes and over-enthusiastic descriptions of the surrounding terrain. I just could never engage with that kind of energy, and I think he noticed. After our little interaction when I fell, he decided it was probably best to leave me to my own devices. I appreciated it. I think that, as a side effect of being outgoing and energetic, you become a lot more perceptive of those individuals who really want nothing to do with you. If anything, I respect people who have reached that level of awareness. There are lots who haven't. I got home absolutely drained of energy. I did what they told me to do, and as I thought, it didn't help one bit. I limped over to my fridge, where a rudimentary checklist made from a ripped page of a college-ruled notebook was haphazardly attached via magnet. In bold letters was the title, Tara's Recovery Plan, with 3 checkboxes. Grabbing a nearby pen, I begrudgingly crossed off the item labeled Nature Walk, and plopped down on the floor. If the universe is kind to me, I won't ever make it to the end of that list. I took off my boots, glancing between the wound on my arm and my foot. Especially if this is the result, I thought to myself. Slowly, I took my sock off, expecting blood, or at least some kind of small object stuck in the cotton. I found neither. Instead, a small thread, no thicker than a strand of hair, stuck out of my foot. I stared at it with a furrowed brow. Strange. Before I could react or reasonably process what I was looking at, it quickly disappeared. A familiar, sharp pain followed, causing me to recoil a bit. What? I muttered, unsure of what else to say. I rested my bare foot against my knee for inspection. The hole was small, almost imperceptibly so, but no one could mistake the slight writhing just underneath the tiny wound. Had a parasite unknowingly made its way into my boot during the hike? I think such a thought would have understandably caused panic in anyone else, but for some reason I felt apathetic. No, that wasn't quite right. Underneath that layer of calm indifference was a slight fascination. I placed my finger softly, so as not to disturb the creature, on the ball of my foot. It beat and pulsed near imperceptibly against the unexpected pressure, attempting in vain to loosen my skin as it tried to wrest itself free. I watched as it struggled, painfully, to preserve its own life. I took a moment to consider my next action. I could continue. I could squish the worm, with nowhere else to go, its viscera and remains trapped under my skin, flagged as invasive, foreign, my body attacking and dispelling its waste until nothing was left. Or, maybe, I could preserve it. Let it feast until I was hollowed out, a husk of skin loosely kept together by marrow and sinew. I was curious as to what would happen if I chose the latter. There was something alluring about the tiny creature, vulnerable and weak, finding that I, of all people, was the most appealing choice. It didn't take long to decide. I avoided putting pressure on the balls of my feet for the next few weeks. I doubt it was necessary, this amount of care, diligence, and effort. But it was the type of person I was. I wanted to be careful. I had chosen to take care of this little creature, so I would take the utmost caution in everything I did henceforth. That slithering feeling never left me. Every passing moment, I could feel its movement within my body. It grew remarkably quickly. At first, it could only navigate within the shallow interior of my skin, but as it grew, it began to burrow deeper and deeper into my flesh. It felt as if it was swimming throughout my internals, an ever-present reminder of the vast expanse of gore that was human anatomy, a sea of meat, constantly nourishing a grateful existence. It was painful at first, of course. As the worm grew, it began to wreak havoc. Every alarm bell screamed and pleaded for me to take action, to expel the foreign invader. I ignored it. Pain was something I could deal with, given time. Even pain of the unbearable variety. Perhaps as a result of its growth and expanded navigation throughout my organs and flesh, I began to vomit on an almost daily basis. It was a wet, crimson concoction of blood and other fluids. One night, I could see small segments of the creature, white and resembling that of a maggot, among the debris. Each section was at least a millimeter thick. The little worm had grown quite a bit since it had first invaded my body. Against my better judgment, I poked at one of the bits of worm I had expelled, which surprisingly wiggled and recoiled at the touch. In passing, I had heard of creatures that could reproduce through fragmentation. It works similarly to autotomy in lizards or starfish, except the regenerated segment instead grew into an entirely separate being. I couldn't help but smile. With a pasta strainer and a little bit of patience, I managed to recover all of the moving, maggot-sized chunks of the worm and set up a tiny, makeshift terrarium on my nightstand, utilizing a spare chafing dish I had lying around the kitchen. I watched as they struggled to navigate the smooth aluminum. I frowned. This won't do, I thought. I grabbed the dish and exited my apartment, practically running down the stairs to the front of the building, where there lay a small patch of greenery and dirt surrounding a large tree. I knelt down, digging my nails into the soil and carefully transferring it and bits of shrubbery into the tin, ignoring the confused and judgmental expressions of passers-by. Chirp. A nearby sound caught my attention. Chirp, chirp. I inspected my surroundings. A few feet to my left was a small sparrow, its visage a subtle, soft combination of browns and grays. The way it looked, it must have been a juvenile. I focused my attention upwards, into the branches of a nearby tree. Fallen from a nest, maybe? Chirp. I felt a pang of pity for the creature and crawled over to it, wanting to bring my face close enough to feel the warmth radiating from its pink, featherless skin. So, it wasn't just pity. It was something deeper, something primal. The instinct to provide. The instinct to feed. I could feel the worm thrashing and flailing within my torso and left arm, beating against my uneaten skin and muscle as if it, too, agreed. Its excitement spurred me to action. I grabbed the fledgling and carefully placed it within the improvised enclosure. Almost immediately, the chunks of worm, as if joined by one single mind, made their way toward the sparrow. Not wanting to make a scene, I quickly covered the tin, grabbed it, and ran toward the safety of my apartment. Chirp. Chee! The creature's cries suddenly stopped. I could feel the weight shifting greatly from side to side as the worm fragments slithered around, away from where I had placed the baby chick. I placed the tray on the kitchen table, hesitantly removing the lid. Only bones were left. The worms were remarkably efficient and clearly engorged. Before me were a couple dozen slightly larger parasites. Incredible, I said out loud. Upon inspecting what was left of the sparrow, I could feel the creature, the main creature, start to flail and slither toward my hands, toward the tin. My skin contorted and bulged in accordance with its movement until it got to my wrists, where it erupted in a bloody display at the base of my palm. Ugh! I shouted in pain as it coiled around my thumb and ring finger with astounding strength, stabilizing itself and reaching toward the bones of the bird. What? There's nothing even left. Of course, it ignored my words. It hovered above the makeshift terrarium, and I watched, horrified, as its mouth expanded to reveal a proboscis with dozens of sharp, jet-black teeth. It shot out with blinding speed, completely engulfing the juvenile sparrow's remnants and covering them in a sticky, mucus-like substance. The shock must have worn off at that point, as I instinctively backed off from the display, forgetting that the creature in question was attached to me. I fell backwards, hitting my head hard and pulling it, and the tin, to the floor. The last thing I remember is those maggot-like fragments crawling toward me as I lost consciousness. I woke up a day later. My apartment was a mess, but otherwise, I was all right. I felt different somehow, and my head was ringing. I glanced over at Tara's recovery plan, which curiously had another list item crossed off. This one I had not done myself. Treat yourself to a nice meal. Upon inspection of my body, I noticed I had several new wounds, gouged out arbitrarily and without much of a pattern. The all-too-familiar feeling of slime and intramuscular movement greeted me soon after. Yet instead of being attached to one continuous body, it was localized over several locations. So they had decided to make me their home too. Within a few months, my palms started to resemble that of a lotus pod. The burrows were a few millimeters in width and connected, such that I could interlace a wire between them if I wished. They were painful. I picked at the wounds frequently. White, cream-colored pus escaped the deep red pits, easily mixing with blood and streaking the substance with a grotesque, pink hue. It was much larger now. Its movement throughout my body was visible even through a thin layer of clothing, displacing my skin to a degree I thought impossible without puncturing it. I was so harrowingly aware of its presence and routine, I felt each segment of the being intertwined throughout my figure with overwhelming accuracy, each curve, twitch, and slither as it used me for nutrients. I estimated it was about 5 meters long, much more than double my height. My appearance was ghastly, body riddled with holes and cracked skin, pale due to dehydration and blood loss. I stopped going out. I ignored calls from family and work. The few times I did have to leave for necessities, I wore heavy clothing and wrapped the larger holes in gauze to keep the bleeding to a manageable level. Anyone else would have stopped here and gone to the hospital, killed the things, and moved on. Anyone else. But I had already made the decision that I would nurture its existence. I became obsessive. I stopped bathing in fear that it would endanger and drown the creatures. I gently nudged the parasites when I felt they were close to my feet or behind, so I didn't accidentally harm them when sitting or standing. As I felt my own body begin to fail and deplete in sustenance, I began to eat raw meat to supplement their diet. On occasion, I would spend time catching the rats that now riddled my filthy apartment. The worms would happily consume them from the inside as I grasped them firmly, exiting the holes in my palm and burrowing inside them with gruesome efficiency. It took less than 10 minutes for the creatures to devour the rats, and eventually, the burrows throughout my body became so large that the creature would drag the rats inside me to feed them to their kin. The creature's new development came in the form of width as well as length. It bored a hole in my solar plexus so wide and deep that my ribs would easily be visible, had they not been obfuscated by the slithering intestines of the worms that now served as my provisional flesh. In the following days, I was in a near-constant state of internal and external hemorrhaging and excruciating pain, yet I lived, against all logical explanation. I could only guess that the worm was sustaining me somehow. I didn't know where all the blood was coming from at this point. No matter how much the worm consumed, I still bled. I was far past the point of questioning it. To be honest, I didn't care much. As long as the worm continued to feast, I was fulfilling my purpose. The more blood I lost, the more the worm changed. It began to take on the appearance of a bloodworm or a leech. Its teeth were visible, present on each segment of its body, rupturing and tearing me with each movement, and its body became maroon-hued. It was long enough at this point that it had coiled itself around my exterior, interwoven throughout my ribs and makeshift cavities. Where the creature ended and I began started to blur. My body is a cavern, filled to the brim with writhing parasites. I thought of my internals, flesh, and organs, how much of it was easily replaced by the worms. Each of my veins, limbs, intestines, and bones, consumed and replaced by the creatures. I thought of my brain. Slimy, wrinkled pink matter. I felt it move and contract in every passing moment. I don't have much in the way of feelings anymore. There was just this hunger, this devastating, ever-present desire to consume. It whispered into my ears, goading me into action. We were getting so tired of sustaining ourselves with rats. I stared at Tara's recovery plan, possibly for the last time. One item remained undone. Get involved with the local community. I think I know a certain group I could start with. Story 7. Grief opened a door. Now I can't close it. I want to bury Cooper beneath the big oak tree in the backyard. It was the only place that felt right. We used to sit there at night. Him chewing a stick, me sipping a beer, both of us watching the sun spill orange across the treetops. He was 12. Old for a sheepdog mutt. His back legs had gotten weak, and the vet said there wasn't much left to do. I stayed with him on that cold steel table until his eyes stopped seeing me. It shattered me. The house got way too quiet after that. Too still. I kept waiting to hear his tags jingling, his claws tapping across the floor. But there was only silence. My routine fell apart. I stopped shaving. I barely ate. I started sleeping on the couch just to avoid the empty spot at the foot of my bed. That was 6 days ago. The scratching started on the 7th. It was just past midnight. Windy. I was half drunk, dozing in front of some late-night infomercial. At first, I thought it was a branch. But then it came again. Scratch, 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 at the back door. A slow, steady rhythm. Purposeful. Familiar. Like how Cooper used to paw at the door when he wanted to come in. I froze. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out the TV. I told myself it was just an animal, probably a raccoon or a stray cat. But when I opened the door, the breath caught in my throat and there he was. Cooper. Matted. Caked in mud. Ribs showing through his fur. His left eye cloudy, the other a glowing yellow I didn't recognize. But it was him. That bent ear. That crooked tail. And he was wagging it. I should have slammed the door. Called someone. But grief messes with your brain. To twist things. Breaks logic. You start hoping even when hope makes no damn sense. Cooper? I croaked. He let out a soft bark. The kind he used to make when he wanted me to throw the ball. I stepped aside. He trotted in. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat across from him in the living room, watching. He didn't eat. Didn't drink. Didn't lie down. Just sat there, staring at me. Tongue out. Smiling. But dogs don't smile like that. Around 3 a.m., I dozed off on the couch. When I opened my eyes, Cooper was right next to me. Too close. His face was inches from mine, eyes wide open, mouth stretched back in that grotesque grin. Then, in a voice that wasn't his, but came from his throat, he whispered, "Thanks for letting me in." I jumped off the couch, heart slamming against my ribs. Cooper, or whatever the hell it was, just sat there, tail slowly thumping the floor. I'm dreaming, I told myself. This is grief. Just grief. A breakdown, that's all. But that whisper had cut through the fog like a blade. It was too clear. Too real. I stumbled into the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I could find, spun around, and he was gone. No paw prints. No fur on the couch. No smell. Like he'd never been there at all. I didn't sleep the next night. Or the one after that. But every night at exactly 0:07, I heard the scratching at the door again. Same rhythm. Same soft bark when I didn't answer. Then silence. On the third night, I waited by the door, knife in hand, no intention of opening it. But I still heard his voice, this time from inside the walls. "You let me in once." I punched a hole in the drywall, trying to find the source. Nothing. I went to the vet. Demanded to see Cooper's body. The receptionist looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but he was cremated yesterday." "Who authorized that?" She checked the file. "You did, Mr. Carver. You signed the paperwork the day he was put down." I hadn't signed anything. I remember leaving in a daze, forgetting my keys, but I never signed a thing. I asked for a copy. There was my signature. Only it wasn't mine. I don't write my R's like that. That's when I started locking every door, every window. I salted the thresholds. Burned sage. Holy water. Everything I could find online, no matter how insane it sounded. The scratching didn't stop. But now it came from different doors. The closet. The attic. Once, even from under the bed. Every night. Always at 7 p.m. And each night the voice came a little closer. You let me in once. You can't take it back. On the 5th night, I woke up with him sitting on my chest. He was heavier than he should have been. Eyes like molten gold. His jaw hung open, tongue dripping black. I couldn't move. His mouth stretched wider than any dog's ever could, far too wide, and he spoke again. You called me back. Begged for me. I'm yours now. Then he leaned in until his teeth brushed my cheek. Forever. I blacked out. The next morning, I tried to leave. I packed a bag, got in my van, and drove until the low fuel light came on. Every road looped back. Every single one. The signs changed, but I always ended up on Ashwood Lane, my street. The sun never moved in the sky. The dashboard clock stayed frozen at 11:59. I stopped at the gas station at the end of the street. It was boarded up, covered in dust. The lights inside flickered, but no one was there. On my way out, I saw the posters. Missing pets. Dozens of them. Eyes scratched out. Smiles twisted. Some of them looked like they were still smiling after death. When I got back home, the front door was wide open. Cooper was waiting inside. He wasn't pretending anymore. His mouth was stretched into a silent scream of a grin, far too wide. Patches of his fur were sloughing off, wet and rotting. Bone glinted beneath. And his shadow, God, his shadow writhed like a dying spider. I collapsed on the porch. He stepped past me. Sat at the top of the stairs. Then he spoke again. But this time, it wasn't his voice. It was mine. I missed you so much. I stopped fighting after that. I started feeding him. Not food. He didn't want that. He wanted memories. Smells. Pieces of the old life. I found my dad's old flannel shirt up in the attic, and he chewed it for hours. I watched the light fixtures flicker when he got excited. Sometimes he brought me things. None of them were his. Once, a collar. It said Milo. I never had a Milo. It's the 11th night. I don't know what's real anymore. I haven't seen the sun in 2 days. Every clock in the house shows a different time. My phone won't turn on. He's sitting next to me as I write this, his breath cold against my neck. Every so often, he licks my ear and whispers things I don't want to hear. Things about where he came from. Things about what I let in. He says I opened the door, not just the wooden one, but the other one. The thin one. The one that keeps things out. The kind of door that should never be opened once it's closed. He says I wanted him back so badly that something else used his shape to get through. He says he's grateful. And now he wants to show me how to open more doors. He wants to teach me how to knock back. I tried to burn the house down. I doused every room in gasoline, lit a match, and watched the flames crawl up the walls. Then I woke up. Back in bed. Cooper on my chest. Smiling. You can't burn a door that's already open, he whispered. I've started hearing more scratching. Beneath the floorboards. In the attic. Down the drains. I don't think the door only opened one way. I don't think I just let Cooper in. I'm changing too. My reflection doesn't blink when I do. My voice echoes even when I whisper. My dreams are full of howling. Cooper sits beside me at night, staring at the walls. Waiting. Last night, I heard another voice. A child's voice. Outside. Cooper, it said. Come on, boy. I opened the door without thinking. Something ran into the woods. It wasn't Cooper, but he followed it. Laughing. He came back this morning. His fur is darker. His teeth are sharper. Thanks for letting me in, he said again. Then, with a wink, we brought more. If you're reading this, don't open the door. No matter how familiar the bark sounds. No matter how much you miss them. No matter what they say. Grief is a door. And something is always waiting on the other side. Scratching. Story 8. Halloween 2015 did not go according to plan. What follows is based on my memory. My name is Andrew Webb. I attended a smaller public university in Louisiana, and it was my junior year. At the time I was a contracted cadet in ROTC, Reserved Officer Training Corps. My best friend and roommate Gene Schultz and I would take the freshmen under our wings and mentor them in military, personal, and academic matters. As a pair of currently enlisted infantrymen, we felt it was our responsibility to look after the new cadets in the program. That fall we had a core group of freshmen, Jake Gilbert, his new girlfriend Harley Caffery, Big Billy. We called him that as he was 6 feet 2 inches, 250-pound guy and a true gentle giant, and I cannot remember his last name, and Barry Carnes. Thursday, October 29th. The ROTC Leadership Lab was winding down. Training was complete, not that most of these cadets needed to know how to conduct the knockout a bunker battle drill, but maybe logistics officers and nurses would if guys like Gene and I were already dead, I guess. The cadets were still laughing and commenting on the costumes from the battalion fun run that morning. A Hispanic cadet had painted intricate sugar skull on her face in honor of Dia de los Muertos. One ginger cadet came as a fairy princess with tutu, wings, and a pink crown. Who am I to judge? Big Billy came as an African warlord, borrowing my maroon airborne beret to give a Beasts of No Nation vibe with the M81 field jacket he borrowed from Gene. Jake came as a famous tennis player, and oddly his girlfriend did not coordinate. Harley came as what looked like a witch drawing symbols on herself and being dressed in black robes. This led senior cadet Sarabeth Walker to talk to her off to the side. Walker was very concerned due to her deep Christian faith. Gene and I came as Raiden and Scorpion respectively from Mortal Kombat as we played as them in our ROTC tournaments, and I spammed the teleport move when we'd play Injustice. As the last squads finished their period of instruction, we fell into formation for the weekend safety brief. Cadet Battalion Commander Peason told us she loved the creativity from the costume run and was happy we took to her idea so enthusiastically. For the safety portion of the safety brief, she reminded us that even though the majority of the cadets were still civilians, they should not get into trouble this weekend as that could bar them from contracting as a future officer in the Army. Don't add or subtract from the local population, they're done. Whispered Gene next to me in formation loud enough our squad could hear, but Cadet Pearson up front could not with 3 ranks between us and her. A handful of snorts of laughter responded from our squad and the squad in front of us as the cadets attempted to maintain military bearing. Or just don't get caught. I replied just for Jin's ears. We broke formation after the command to dismiss was given. Gene pulled our men aside as I stood next to him. Now we don't care what y'all do this weekend, but be safe and smart about it. Gene started with a caring and authoritative tone. Stay with friends and keep a battle buddy. Just cause y'all are under the age doesn't mean we are under the illusion that you won't be drinking, especially you Carnes. I know your frat has a costume party Saturday. I said, providing my observations of our cadets' social lives. Carnes gave a look of feigned shock at the insinuation that he was drinking at 18. Quan jumped in as if we rehearsed this. We had not. We just spent so much time together we knew when to continue sentences. If at any point you are in trouble and need a QRF to come save your asses, call me or Webb and we will be there in 7 minutes to anywhere in town or on campus. Other than that, have a good Halloween this Saturday and see y'all Monday morning for PT. I concluded just in time as Cadet Walker came over. Cadet Webb, Cadet Schultz, Mr. Clark asked me to have you 2 maintenance and hook up the new propane tank to the grill behind the armory. She asked in her firm, polite way when she would hide her meek nature. Of course he asked for us. I laughed. Gene and I always get the hey you tasks. You two are probably the most reliable and capable cadets we have on campus, Ander. She said, dropping the formality in a caring way that reminded me of when we were close. Gene turned to us after our ments left and headed to their cars. Hey Walker, do you care if Webb comes over Saturday when Annalie and I hang out? Of course not, we can all hang out and watch some scary movies. If she had any objections to me coming over, she did not show it. Gene was dating Sarabeth's older sister Annalie. Sarabeth and I had dated at the end of the previous semester. I had spent the past months getting over being sent back to the friend zone by her before our summer apart due to military training. I knew it was over, She was dating a guy 12 years older than us from the city an hour north of campus that was an overly charismatic Christian that made my lukewarm faith look like more heathen than any form of holy. But the continued texting and overly friendly contact for 5 months since the breakup made me want to be a better man. Mixed signals are an understatement. Sarabeth left the armory while Jean and I cleaned the grill and installed the new propane tank to the old gas grill behind the armory that had been in disrepair since we started attending school 2 years before. I gave it a good test fire with my Zippo to ensure it was working too for good measure. The next home game for the football team was in 2 weeks, and we did not want our work to be in vain when the program would be feeding the cadets and veterans at the upcoming Veterans Day game. We jabbed at each other with jokes about everything under the sun as we drove to our apartment across from the campus before cracking open a few Younglings and fired up our Xboxes for a late night of COD Black Ops 2 Zombies and Battlefield 4. Thus Thursday night went. Friday, October 30th. Friday, I had a couple of classes in Roman and medieval history and Jin's engineering program, after which another night of drinking and gaming, as Jean texted Annalie and I just tried to enjoy the night. Saturday, October 31st. The day was about as normal as Halloween in a Louisiana college town could be, 75 degrees and 100% humidity. Jean and I went to Walmart across town to get some food to bring to the Walker sisters' house and liquor to relax with. We were checking out when we saw Harley checking out with what looked like a cutting board for some craft supplies. "I can't believe you tried to sleep with her, bro." I jabbed at Jean. "I can't either, I wasn't thinking with my head." Jean retorted as he bagged the bottle of Jameson from the cashier, "The good stuff our meager sergeant's pay would allow. You were just the wrong one." I chided back. Jean gave a hearty chuckle at that. Later that evening we drove my 1997 Ford Explorer over to the Walker's house, a small weathered white house on cinder blocks. Jean and Annalie embraced while Sarabeth and I took the food and drinks to the kitchen in the back. The evening was enjoyable. I played some Settlers of Catan. The flirtation between Jean and Annalie was hilarious. Sarabeth was on the phone with her boyfriend for most of the evening, while she did that and the happy couple cleaned the dishes together. I took the trash to the curb. I considered grabbing my small pocket Bible out of the center console of my car to appear more pious, but decided that was a hollow, useless thing to do. After Sarabeth finished her phone call, she suggested that we watch Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp. I was apparently the only person that had not seen it. The only horror movie I had seen before was The Exorcist. I did not like scary movies at the time. My male bravado told me to just suck it up as the movie began. Looking back, I was such a little bitch for thinking Sleepy Hollow would be scary, underrated Tim Burton movie honestly. Jean and Annalie cuddled on the couch as I seated the recliner to Sarabeth and pulled up a dining room chair. The movie was enjoyable. Casper Van Dien had just died on screen, R.I.P. Johnny Rico. When Jean got a phone call, it was around 2200. He stood up and responded with, "Hey Big Billy, what up bro?" as he rounded the corner of the living room into the kitchen out of earshot. Annalie paused the movie expecting that we would continue it momentarily. All I heard over Jin's pacing was, "Wait, what? How? What's that sound? We are coming." He strode back into the living room with the grim determination that our profession beat into us. The tone was all business. "Web up. What's going on, bud?" I responded as I stood up with the sense of urgency that was felt throughout the room. Big Billy called, "Something's wrong at Harley's apartment. I'll brief you en route." Jin switched from puppy love to mission ready in a second flat. I felt that unease from the beginning of the night and something was up. He turned to Annalie and told her everything is okay and we just needed to teach the freshmen about the importance of pacing themselves at frat parties. Sarabeth offered a couple bottles of Pedialyte she had for after ruck marches. "It's okay, I don't think it's needed." Jean responded politely. I knew he was hiding something from the girls. I told Sarabeth bye and she grabbed my arm and said, "There is something wrong with this, please be safe." I felt my skin tighten as I stood in the doorway as if I was in a freezer, not in the humid night that is the American South. I have a weird feeling too, but it's probably just Jake or Harley discovering Everclear. See you soon. Jean and I walked to my car with purpose through the still muggy night. I turned my head and could see both sisters standing in the doorway with the look of concern on their faces. Once my rundown Explorer turned over, I firmly asked, What are we getting into? Jean let a short exhale out and looked at me with a level of concern that I only saw the past summer during the Red River floods when we were activated for high water rescue. Head to Harley's apartment with urgency once we make the corner and are out of sight. Don't scare the girls. I put the car in drive and headed to the intersection, then gunned it down University Boulevard towards the side of the campus that Harley lived in. He continued, Big Billy is at Harley's apartment trying to help Jake. Barry is leaving his frat's party to help him, but it's weird. What's weird? You got your Bible? Yeah, why? Harley built a Ouija board after we saw her at Walmart this morning and wanted to have some fun with it, and Jake thought it would be a fun way to hang out on Halloween. She's acting strange and Jake's freaking out and Big Billy is out of his depth. I knew this was not a joke. On school breaks and between National Guard training and natural disasters during the summers, the first worked at Target stocking shelves. There the infamous Ouija boards are sold for ages 8 and up. They would be found in the morning having fallen off the shelf and routinely throughout the day laying on the ground. Both Jean and I were raised by Christian families that instilled in us an understanding of how things like that could open a door that could not be easily closed. Both of us might have lived a heathen lifestyle as young grunts, but our upbringing still held, and his Korean mother taught him to avoid the supernatural as one's soul is easy to lose to otherworldly forces. What was the weird noise on the phone? I inquired. I don't know. Jean responded with grim determination. As we were speeding across campus, Jean's scan locations, campus police were known to sit and wait. I silently hoped they were busy at Greek Row and not over by the dorms. We parked in the first open spot we could find inside the gated dorms 500 feet from Harley's. I grabbed my Bible from the car and put it in my back pocket and followed Jean to Harley's dorm, which was on the second floor and closest to the stairs that accessed the floor. As we approached, we could hear screaming. We looked at each other with hesitance. We were trained to charge into combat, but the screams of a girl and the possibility of a God knows what gave us pause. Then we knocked. The screaming stopped. We knocked again, and heard footsteps approaching from behind the door, and Big Billy opened it looking exhausted and color drained from his face. Guys, you're here. She just stopped fucking screaming, and Billy rambled off without a breath. When, where, and how did this start? I interrupted. He pointed at the coffee table that was covered with a handful of crosses and crucifixes. Harley wanted to summon a ghost and Jake, and I played along with it. That was 30 minutes before I called y'all. Nothing happened until she drew symbols on her arm like she did for the costume run on Thursday. After that, the room got cold, and Harley started acting weird. Weird how, details Billy. Interrupted Jean. I could hear Jake in the bedroom talking to Harley with no responses. She started to shake, then eyes rolled for a couple seconds. Billy gathered his thoughts. She then stood up and took the board outside, and we did not see where she went. Then she came back and fucking freaked out. She started screaming and muttering some shit Jake and couldn't understand. She then hit Jake and started to look for something in the kitchen. Jean, go check the room with Jake. I commanded. Jean moved immediately. Why are there crosses on the table? Jake told me to grab whatever I could to repel whatever was summoned, since that's where it happened. Billy responded. A loud scream and impact came from the bedroom. I rushed in with Billy behind me to see Jake standing in the corner with terror on his face, and Jean slumped against the wall as if he just got hit by a linebacker. Harley stood next to her bed, all 5 feet 1 inch and 98 pounds of her recoiling after what looked like a shot-put throw. Harley, where is the board? I asked in a calm, authoritative voice. None of your concern. She responded with an unnatural tone compared to her normal docile voice. Thinking quickly as Jean stood back up, seeing Harley's keys in her right sweatpants pocket, I took a chance asking, is it in your car? She turned her attention directly to me with a rage in her eyes that confirmed my hunch. Jean saw this too, and we knew what came next. Under normal circumstances, Jean and my 6 feet 3 inches, 200-pound physique would easily overpower Harley, but as Jean already found out she was stronger than her body should be, she failed every event on the physical fitness test we had taken a month ago, which we were helping her improve on. This was going to hurt. We need her keys, don't try to hurt her. I ordered the men in the room with me, and they understood as Big Billy and Jean lunged at Harley, taking an arm each. That was before she tossed Billy off like he was a discarded towel. Jin's attempt found purchase as he had grasped her left arm, the arm with the strange markings. Jake followed in Billy's wake, jumping over him as he clung to her right arm. I moved quickly, covering the 8 feet between myself and Harley to body check her into the bed to give us the advantage in this most bizarre struggle. Thinking the upper hand was gained, I felt 2 feet plant on my chest, and before I could comprehend what she was doing, I was airborne and flew 6 feet, landing feet, ass, head on the dorm room's cheap carpet that did little to soften the uncontrolled fall. Billy, already up, rushing past me to achieve control of her legs as I recovered. There was something else at work here. I pushed between Jake and Billy and plunged my hand into her right pants pocket, gripping hold of the car keys. "Got them!" I bellowed, and Jean immediately let go of her arm and we rushed for the door out. Behind us I heard 2 loud collisions, one against a wall and one I saw the result of, Big Billy once again thrown to the ground. I tossed Harley's keys to Jean as he passed me in the doorway, with him giving me a nod of understanding. He was halfway down the stairs when I vaulted myself over the railing to make up for any lost time, as I could hear the screams coming for us. Landing as I was trained to as a paratrooper, feet, thigh, back, and with a roll to keep the momentum, I saw Harley coming for me like a predator that was to overwhelm its prey. The atmosphere was no longer still. The trees were being whipped by high winds and the howling was audible like in a thunderstorm. In full sprint with her gaining, I caught sight of Barry coming around the dorm building's corner. "What the fuck's going on?" I was hitting it off with it, he called with an annoyed tone. He must have not been given the situation from Big Billy. "Fucking run!" I bellowed back as I approached him. He saw Harley giving chase and caught on as he attempted to catch up to me. "Double back to her apartment to help the guys," I ordered as we were almost to my car. He split off as Harley stopped 20 feet from me as I slid into my driver's seat. She screamed a throaty and gut-wrenching bellow that made me wish I had more than a pocketknife on me. She turned and took off in the direction Jean took, towards what I assessed to be her car and the infernal Ouija board. I pulled out of the parking space, driving parallel to her new direction of pursuit. There was a block of apartment-style dorms between us, but I was betting on Jean taking an obscured route back to my car for Xville. I was right that our mutual base-level instincts brought him directly to me. I stopped and Jean, carrying what to any casual observer looked to be a cutting board, quickly jumped in the passenger seat. "Fucking drive, bro!" He yelled mere feet from my face as I looked past him and saw the petite figure was 40 feet behind him in relentless pursuit, bellowing the same primal roar as before. We took off, and whatever being was watching over us must have had some pity on us as the gate was open, allowing us to get out of the confined parting lot and onto the street. "What the fuck was that about? This can't be what I think it is," Jean said between labored breaths. "I am scared it is exactly that, but I am having a really hard time believing it," I said in response between my own attempts at catching my breath. "Call the walkers, ask if we can come back, and if they have an idea of what to do with this thing. They go to church way more than us." Jean dialed Annalie and she picked up on the second ring. "Hey, all's good." He lied. "Do y'all mind if we come back over? We have a Ouija board that needs to be destroyed." I could hear the shock and rejection of that proposal without the phone being on speaker. Jean tried to argue with what sounded like both sisters as I drove around campus waiting on a plan to form. "Okay, yeah, prayers would be great, and I think we can do that, thanks, bye baby," Jean said, finishing the call. "Well, they don't want this shit anywhere near them and said their only knowledge of the matter is to burn it and bury the ashes." I turned on the next street I saw and without saying a word headed to the ROTC armory. Ding. "Great, Harley's texting me," Jean said sarcastically, opening his phone. "It says, 'Do not destroy it, bring it back. You cannot stop what we started.'" "Well, that's concerning." I nodded to the phone. "She's talking in plural now?" Jean replied with a puzzled reaction, reading the latest text. "I will not be banished by you, she's mine." Bro, what fucked up supernatural episode are we in? "I don't know, bud," I replied as I pulled sloppily into the lower parking lot of the ROTC armory. We rushed up the stairs that connected the parking lot to the porch with the grill. Jean pulled the cover off and tossed me the lighter fluid and I started spraying it on the board. "Bro, there's no lighter and she's calling." Jean lamented. The pressure was getting to him. I was on edge too. "Don't answer her." "I've got mine in the car," I responded as I ran down the hill to retrieve my Zippo. The cacophony of text message notifications and phone call rings could be heard both up and down the hill as the desperation could be felt from whatever Harley had become to get the board back. Gene had placed the board on the grill rack. I could smell the lighter fluid, and he crouched down ready to turn on the gas as I flicked the lighter and held the flame next to the board. It did not light. "What to ever-loving fuck?" Gene shouted in disbelief. He looked at his phone and read, "I see you." We turned to our west and we could see her dorm a half a mile away across the cross-country track, and we realized we had minutes from her arriving if she headed this way. "Call the guys and tell them to keep her distracted," I told Gene as I gathered pine straw off the ground. He did so and reported, "They see her, and they will keep her from the gate on this side of the dorms. Hopefully she can't jump 15-foot fences." With my improvised torch of pine straw, I lit it, protecting it from the wind, and the flame started. Gene turned the knob on the grill and propane light. The broad still wouldn't light. "Ander," Gene said in frustration, barely above a whisper the wind nearly drowned out. "How?" We stared at the unburnt board, and I pulled out my Bible that was now covered in sweat and moist to the touch after being in my jeans for the past 15 minutes of chaos, and flipped through it blindly for something I did not know what. I landed seemingly at random on Matthew 6 verse 9. I opened my mouth to see the red text, "Our Father." Immediately, with the rage of a wildfire, the board erupted into flame. Gene threw the grill's lid closed, singeing some arm hair in the process. With a reaction that displayed exhaustion, surprise, and relief, he told me, "Keep reading." So, I read the rest of the Lord's Prayer, the Beatitudes, Psalm 23, and anything with red text that caught my eye over the sound of the hollowing wind. After 2 minutes we opened the lid. The wood that was the board was charcoal, and the vinyl letters that had been glued on melted away, except for the bottom portion that was still perfectly in place but just as blackened and cracked as the rest of the wood. It read, "Goodbye." I took my knife out, striking downward with the butt of my knife. The board shattered into ash. Ding! Gene looked down at his phone as the wind died down to the calm. The night was less than 30 minutes ago. Harley texted and said, "Thanks for destroying it." "How does she know that you just destroyed it?" "No clue." I shrugged, not wanting to say what I believed in my soul it really was. We gathered the ashes and buried them in the roots of a tree that fell over during the last hurricane. Called Big Billy after Barry and Jake had not answered. He happily reported Jake was asleep on the couch in their dorm, and Harley passed out after the wind stopped, and they put her in her own bed and tucked a cross next to her for good measure. Barry apparently went back to his frat party and might be drunk. The Walker sisters were glad we were okay as we left most of the details out. We drove back to our apartment while telling them good night over the phone. We got into the apartment and Gene collapsed onto the couch while I walked over to the counter and grabbed the bottle of Jameson, which Gene, upon seeing, reached his hand out in a "bring it here" motion. He opened it and took a long swig as I sunk into the couch next to him. He handed me the bottle, and I took my own deep chug of whiskey. "Dude, I do not know what just happened. Let's just forget all of it." Gene said, all energy drained from his voice and demeanor. "I think it was something very bad." I responded, "This shit only happens in horror movies, not in reality. We just saw all that and you're saying we didn't experience it?" The bottle was being passed back and forth like a reverse talking stick. "Either way, I am going to get drunk and forget about this night." Gene responded, "Well, I'll join you in that endeavor, brother. Also, I think I'm Sam and you're Dean." "Bet." Gene replied with his characteristic mischievous nature finally returning. We finished the bottle and passed out into our separate rooms. From that night, nobody talked about it or remembered the details of the night. The Walker sisters did not pry into what we did or what happened to cause an impromptu burning of a Ouija board. Jake and Harley continued dating, why we did not know, but we made plenty of crazy girl jokes as to that. But they never revisited the events of that Halloween night. Gene, to the last day we ever talked in 2020, denied the events of that night ever happened. This period of time that only I recall makes me more concerned and suspicious regarding the nature of what came through the door that was opened that night. Story, mine. My sister and the boogeyman. I want to be clear, I remember this happening. Regardless of anything else, I believe in my heart of hearts that this happened. I woke up in the middle of the night to look at my window. My body felt like it was morning, but it was still dark out. My eyes fluttered and I could make out, across from me, a small glow on my side. I turned, and on the other side of the nightstand, Izzy was gripping her security flashlight and muttering to herself. "Is okay, Sophie, if we keep the light on then it will be okay. I won't let him get you this time." I groaned. Sharing a bedroom with my sister didn't feel like it used to be hard, but the gap between 6 and 10 felt bigger now. "Izzy," I groaned. I tapped the alarm clock/white noise machine between us and saw that it was after 1 in the morning. "Go to sleep. It's late. We got school tomorrow." "I can't," Sophie said. "The boogeyman is coming tonight." I threw myself down on my bed and covered my face with my pillow. I wanted to scream. 1. The boogeyman is not real. 2. Sophie is not real either, so even if he was real, I wouldn't trust your imaginary friend about it. Freddie V told me the boogeyman came to his house and ate his dog. He said that when the boogeyman eats things, he eats everything. He doesn't leave anything behind. "Yeah, well, I know Freddie V's brother and he never had a dog," I retorted, "and even if he did, Freddie V and his brother are both assholes." "You shouldn't say that," Izzy called out. "His brother called me worse," I said, "and it was true and he's still an asshole. Trust me, and trust me, Freddie V has probably said worse than that. Either way, you shouldn't trust those morons and you shouldn't trust Sophie, and we should go to sleep." "Don't be mean to Sophie," Izzy said. "Sophie told me you used to be friends and she's scared." "Yeah, why?" "Because the boogeyman got her once, and she doesn't want him to come again." "Go to sleep." I rolled over, pressing the pillow over my head, hoping that I had the final word. Izzy stayed silent, and for a moment I thought I could actually will myself to sleep. But I made the mistake of turning and catching a glimpse of my sister still sitting up, cradling the flashlight. I sighed. "Okay, let's be reasonable," a phrase my STEM teacher used. "Say the boogeyman is real and he eats kids and he even ate Freddie V's dog. Wouldn't we have heard a news story about a dog being eaten? Wouldn't we hear about kids vanishing into closets or under beds?" "Mommy got that text about that kid who went missing," said Izzy. "Yeah, but that was just like their dad took them. Like Mommy said the kid was in a silver car. Do you think the boogeyman drives a silver car?" "Maybe." "No, Izzy," I chastised. "No, because that would be stupid. And the boogeyman is stupid and Freddie V is stupid and this is all stupid and you need to just go to sleep." "Okay," Izzy said sadly, turning off her flashlight. "Good night," I said, but soon I just heard her start sobbing. "Ugh," I groaned. "Do you need me to sleep with you or what?" "Itchem," Izzy whimpered. "Jesus, fine, okay." I slipped out of bed and felt my bare foot step on a Lego. Crap. I leaned over to switch on the lamp. When I did, I saw 2 massive, spiny, gray arms with long and bony fingers lingering over my sister, the fingers bent like massive jaws ready to grab their prey. I froze, the fingers seeming to pulse, ready to strike like 2 copperheads. "What's wrong?" Izzy asked. I didn't know what to say. I slowly moved forward and reached for Izzy's hand. I squeezed tight. "Nothing's the matter, Izzy," I said, trying to steady her voice. "I just want you to come into my bed." "Okay." Izzy was still. I could tell she knew I was scared. I couldn't stop staring at the purple veins that flowed under the skin of the large arms, and the dried brown flakes underneath its massive claws. The weird part is that I didn't feel shock or surprise. I felt like this had happened before. "Izzy, you gotta listen to me," I said, seeing one of the fingers twitch. "Go!" I screamed, and I grabbed my sister's wrists and yanked her back, pulling her backwards as I fell back onto my twin bed. I grabbed Izzy by the nightgown, but one of the arms jolted out from under Izzy's bed. The massive hand grasped Izzy's torso, her neck and head fitting right between its fingers as its claws dug into her nightgown. "Izzy!" I screamed as I planted my ass into the bed and pulled back, trying to get her out of it. I can remember her screaming my name. "Manny, Manny," Izzy cried out desperately. "No, no, no," I sobbed as I felt Izzy's small hand slip out of my grasp. I watched in horror as Izzy was yanked sharply under the bed. Before I could even react to what happened to Izzy, Another hand shot out to grab me. I threw myself to the foot of the bed to avoid the grasp. I leapt off of the bed, but tripped as another shot from under Izzy's bed. I scrambled to my feet and grabbed a chair. I swung around and tossed it hard at the hand as it tried to grab me like it had grabbed Izzy. Then I charged out of the room, my shoulders slamming into the hallway wall. "Mommy! Daddy!" I screamed. I charged down the hallway, praying that it wasn't too late for Izzy. I barreled into my parents' room and started violently shaking my sleeping dad's shoulders. "Daddy! Daddy! Wake up! It's Izzy! The boogeyman's got Izzy!" Dad shot up, groaned, and slowly rubbed my back. "Manny, relax, it's okay. Come on." He gently jostled Mom's shoulder. "Louisa, come on. It happened again." I shook my head. "Please, we gotta go. Daddy, we got to go help her, we gotta help her." "It's all right," said Dad as he grabbed my hand and brought me back to the bedroom. I knew I should be scared, but he was so calm. I felt dizzy as I came back to my room. The twin beds were gone, replaced by a full bed that sat in the center of the room. There were no Barbie dream houses or little kid stuffies. Just trophies that I had won, photos of my friends, a desk that had not been there before. What happened? Where's her bed? Where's her stuff? "It's okay," Dad said. "You just had a nightmare again?" I nodded as I sat on the side of my bed. "I had a sister and the boogeymen came and got her." Dad nodded. "I know, honey. And I know it felt real, just like last time." Mom followed in with a glass of water and a melatonin gummy. "And honey, you know you don't have a sister." She sat next to me and wrapped her arms around me. "And you know the boogeyman isn't real." I exhaled. I know. I'm sorry she just felt real." "We know," Dad said. "Do you want to sleep in our room or will you be okay?" I chewed the gummy and took a sip of water. "I'll be okay." "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Mom said. "That's what we're here for." I tucked myself back in and watched my parents slowly leave. And I know. A teenage girl posts about her scary dream, but I don't know. I'm not adding details. I remember all of this. I don't remember anything else about this girl, this sister, Izzy, but I remember that night so clearly. I've written it down so many times so I don't forget. Because here's the thing, I've talked to my mom and dad about it, and they said that Izzy was an imaginary friend. I had a few imaginary friends apparently. They weren't always called Izzy though. No, before that I had another imaginary sister who I cried about being eaten by the boogeyman. Her name was Sophie. Story 10. I'm never going camping again. 3 years ago, my group decided to go on a camping trip. Not just going to an RV park and chilling kind of camping, but a proper tent and campfire trip. See, I'm a chronic glamper. If given the choice between roughing it out in the wild and chilling in an air-conditioned RV, I'm picking the RV every time. I enjoy my creature comforts and I always have. Jake, one of the guys that runs in our little group, prides himself on being a true outdoorsman. As our group usually ends up taking trips to nearby lakes and national parks, it's become a bit of a strain between the two of us. It'd be one thing if he could respect that I'm not here to have an authentic experience and just want to have fun, but he can't. He needles and mutters about how they could be going to cooler places if only we didn't have to always glamp to get out of the damn house. I think that's why I accepted his trip proposal. Normally I'd shut it down without question, but he'd been getting on my nerves for years. I accepted, thinking I'd prove once and for all that I can do it the rough and tough way. Maybe then he'd leave me the hell alone. Jake planned out a trip for us and our other 2 friends to a nearby lake on his family's property. When we arrived, I tried to ask where exactly in there we were going, but he'd just smirk. "Relax, Maddie. The trail's marked. Even you won't get lost." Behind me, Chris and Luke, the other 2 coming with us, started up a conversation about Esmores and the supposed lake at the place we're going to. I felt my shoulders relax. Jake pulled out a compass and let us due north. According to him, we had to follow the compass a little ways until we found some trees he and his family had marked with red triangles. From there, you follow the path. The sun was going down by the time we spotted the first red triangle. I checked my phone, which said it was about 7:30. I also checked my signal, nothing. The pack straps were digging into my shoulders, and Luke was huffing as he trudged behind Chris and me. Funny. Despite the fact that Luke was obviously the least capable of us, it's still me that Jake liked to piss on. "Jake," I called. He paused and turned to me, a familiar irritated expression on his face. "Can we pause for a minute? I gotta take a piss." I didn't mention that Luke looked ready to puke, but he seemed to see it anyway when he looked at him. Jake huffed. "Don't get lost. I want to get to our site so we can get set up." I dropped my pack to the ground and started walking off the trail some. I could hear Luke wheezing behind me, obviously tired from the trek. The woods were quiet as I broke from the trail. I listened around for the birds or crickets, but it was dead silent. I glanced over my shoulder, making sure I was far enough away, and relieved myself. I zipped up and began to turn back when a branch cracked behind me. My head snapped back in the direction of the noise, but there was nothing. I turned and began walking back, and the crunching of leaves started behind me. I stopped, and so did the noise. It was my own footsteps. It had to be. But I started again, faster this time, and nearly broke into a run when the crunching just seemed to get louder and louder. I busted through the tree line, hitting the trail and whirling around to see what had been on my heels. Nothing. I stared out at the forest, waiting. There wasn't even a rustle of leaves from the wind, just silence. "Matt, let's go," Chris called, breaking my staring contest with the empty trees. I turned and jogged up the trail to catch up with them. As I picked my pack up off the ground, I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Did you guys hear that?" They all turned to look at me. "Hear what?" Luke answered. I couldn't quite bring myself to spit it out. After all, what had I heard? Leaves crunching when I walked? I shook my head. Jake continued to lead us towards the campsite, the red triangles leading us ever onwards. I looked at them closer as we passed. They were spray painted on, with each tree being marked on both sides so that they could be seen no matter the direction you were coming from. Each marker was about 5 meters apart, and at any given time you could see the next few up ahead. The sun was nearly set when we broke through to the spot by the lake. I had to hand it to the bastard. The sight was beautiful. The trees all stood in glorious formation, shades of green mottled with the golden light of the sunset. The water shined a slightly muddy blue-gray, peppered with that same golden light stretching through the trees. We each picked a spot to pitch our tents. Luke and I got put on tent duty while Chris and Jake, our 2 more experienced outdoorsmen, went out to find some good sticks for firewood. As I finished getting my tent up, I glanced over at Luke. He was struggling to get the stakes in the ground. I signed, turning to help. We got his tent pitched and worked together to get the other 2 up. As we were finishing up with Chris's tent, the other 2 came back. I could see Jake looking over his tent, probably ready to find something to criticize me on. I was proud when he couldn't find anything. Chris and Jake threw some of the wood into the spot we designated as our fire pit, putting the rest of it close by for later use. They got the fire started and we all idly chatted as the sun sank beneath the hills. Luke got up and brought his backpack over. As he unzipped the pack and reached in, I smiled. Hershey's chocolate bars, a box of graham crackers, giant fluffy marshmallows. I glanced over and saw my grin mirrored on Chris's face. Jake rolled his eyes, but obligingly got up to grab some sticks to roast the marshmallows on. We gorged ourselves on granola bars and s'mores as the world around us turned dark. "Hey Matt," Chris started. I looked at him, mouth and hands sticky with melted sugar. "Earlier today when you ran off to take a piss. What was that all about?" I looked at him puzzled. "You ran out of there like a bat out of hell. Then you were all, did you guys hear that?" He pitched his voice up and my eyes twitched. He grinned goofily at me. I didn't quite know what to say. I didn't want to scare Luke, who was looking a bit nervous, and I still wasn't convinced I hadn't made the whole thing up. "I thought I heard something behind me," I settled on. "The branch snapped kinda loud and it freaked me out." Jake snorted. "Really? All that fuss over a branch cracking? In the woods?" Yeah, I know. That's why I dropped it. It wasn't much." Chris and Luke exchanged a look, seeming to sense that wasn't quite it. But Jake was snickering at my foolishness and neither quite seemed like they wanted to press. We all went to bed after putting the fire out. I tossed and turned some, but overall the night passed on without incident. In the morning, we all woke up to the sound of Jake hollering that if we wanted to fish, now was the time before it got too hot. The lake was a blast. We sat around fishing for a while, chatting as the sun rose up in the sky. The fish were particularly hesitant to bite, but as Chris launched into a story, I found myself having a good time anyways. We scrambled some eggs we'd brought along in Jake's fancy cooler over the fire when we got too hungry. I considered asking him if bringing food in was cheating, but it wasn't worth the fight. At about noon, we started swimming. The water was nice and warm from the summer heat, and I spent a good chunk of time just floating and soaking up the sun. That of course was ruined when Luke snuck up on me underwater and grabbed me around the gut, flipping me over and giving me a nose full of lake water. We splashed around for a good long while. The thing that drove us back to the shore was our grumbling stomachs. Luke and I were chatting excitedly about finding some good sticks for roasting the hot dogs we'd brought along when I ran straight into Chris's back. "Whoa, Chris. Dude, what's dash?" I paused. Chris and Jake were just staring towards our campsite. I followed their gaze. Plastic littered the ground. All the meat we had brought with us had been torn out of its packages and was gone, leaving only the wrappers behind. Luke's tent, which had the marshmallows and chocolate, had its flap shredded. The flap was still zipped up closed, but the middle was gaping like an open wound. My blood ran cold. Luke had caught up and was looking as nervous as me. Even Jake looked shaken. "I mean, we are in bear territory," I tried to reason. "Guess we should have locked down the food a bit better." Jake looked pissed. "You think I didn't plan for that? No damn bear is getting into these containers. I don't even know why they would. The meat's all packaged. They say bears are pretty smart. Maybe they..." Luke tried. "That cooler had a lock on it no bear could undo. It'd have to bust the damn thing open." Silence weighed heavily on us as we looked at the cooler. The nice, shiny, pristine cooler. "Maybe we should head back." "I mean, we don't have any food left," Luke suggested nervously. I looked up at the sky. The sun was still relatively high, but it was rapidly sinking down. It'd be dark by the time we made it back to our cars. Then I looked over at Luke's tent. I stared at the shredded door, the carefully opened backpack. What was worse? Risking getting lost in the woods, or risking staying? That wasn't a real choice and I knew it. "Let's get our stuff packed up and let's go. We have our heavy-duty flashlights," I said. Chris and Luke didn't need any convincing. They hustled to get their tents taken down and their stuff ready. Jake looked hesitant. "I don't think leaving now is a good idea. He checked his watch, already 5:30. "By the time we get back." "It'll be dark, I know," I agreed. "But it's either that or staying here for another night." He huffed and started getting his stuff together. My tent came down easy enough and I had all my stuff packed quickly. When I shrugged on my pack and turned to the other guys, I could see Jake stomping out the fire embers and grabbing his compass. "Everyone got their lights?" he said, bad mood evident. Chris and Luke nodded, although Luke looked vaguely ill at the thought of navigating by flashlight. I wasn't faring much better. We all started back the way we came in. Jake took the lead, following the trail markers. Luke followed close behind him. Chris and I took up the rear, keeping pace beside one another. "You think it was a bear?" he asked. I shrugged. "Dunno. Never actually had an encounter with one." "I have," he said. "Dad and I went camping when I was a kid. The family next to us on the grounds didn't properly store up their trash." "You saw it?" "Sure did. Black bear. Ugly thing. Spawned a whole lecture from my dad about how to properly store food and trash so you don't attract them." He paused. "Not gonna lie to you, Matt. I don't think this was a bear." I waited for him to elaborate, but he just looked at the cooler Jake was carrying. "We followed all the safety precautions?" "Not just that. We were pretty damn close to the shore. Splashing and running around, just lots of noise. Bears don't like noise." "Jake? What way do we go?" Luke called, interrupting our silent musing. I looked up from my feet, confused. The spray-painted red triangle was visible on the tree ahead of us. Jake paused. "What way do we?" He glanced around. I took the opportunity to do the same. Luke was practically bouncing from foot to foot in his eagerness to go. "Where's the other path to go off to?" "Another part of the lake?" he asked, giving a nervous laugh. Jake wasn't laughing though. In fact, he was turning an alarming shade of white. I could feel his sudden fear radiating off of him. I was starting to match it. Beyond the tree with our marker, I could distinctly see two paths marked in the same fashion. One veered off slightly to the left and the other veered off slightly to the right. The marker was dead center. We'd have to choose a path. Jake, which one goes to our cars? I asked. It was a testament to how stunned he was that he didn't tear me a new one over for questioning him. There'd only been one path coming up, and it was straight as an arrow. We hadn't even taken a little side step, had just marched straight through the woods. Neither of these paths went straight forward like we had when we came up. So what was this? A whole new split complete with a line of markers for a path that wouldn't take us back to our cars? You and your family put these markers up, right? Which way do we go? I asked, urgency creeping into my voice. I don't know, he said, his voice cracking. We never really went out of the path. We definitely didn't mark a new path, and we wouldn't mark with the same damn markers. I looked up again. The sun had crept further down, painting the sky with a faint shade of orange. We were getting closer and closer to sunset. Jake, are you sure we're going the right way? Chris asked. I turned to see him and Luke huddled together behind us. Yes, we go right. Ignore the damn markers on the left, we go right. How do we know though? I mean, those aren't the same markers we followed, right? There was only one path coming up, Chris nervously asked. Jake let out a frustrated huff. He slung his pack to the ground and walked over to a tree with some low-hanging branches. I'll climb up here and find the clearing we parked near. That way we can ignore the damn markers and go to the road. Happy? He snarled before grabbing the branch and beginning to climb. We watched him climb till about halfway up when the leaves began to obscure him. I could hear the branches rustling as he continued his climb. Well, Chris hollered. I see the road. Jake yelled back. We all let out a sigh of relief. This whole trip has been a bit of a nightmare, I commented. Chris and Luke both nodded. I waited to hear the crackling of the branches as Jake climbed down. They never came. We waited there at the bottom for what felt like an eternity. Jake? Buddy? Are you coming down from there? Chris called. No answer. I frowned, trying to see through the thick canopy. Suddenly, I heard the sound of something hurtling through the branches. The crashing was fast, a free fall as whatever it was collided with everything in its path. I jumped back in time to avoid being knocked over the head with whatever it was that had fallen. I looked down. A hiking boot lay sideways on the ground, its ties unlaced. I looked back up into the canopy. The wind blew a little harder, shuffling the leaves just enough for me to see higher up the tree. Jake was gone. I blinked once, twice, before turning back to the others. Chris and Luke both were staring at the shoe. Luke had Chris's arm in a vice grip, his breathing beginning to speed up in a telltale sign of panic. Chris looked back up. Jake? Where the hell are you? This ain't funny. Still silent. We waited 5 minutes, then 10. The only noise around us was the wind rustling through the leaves and the sound of Luke getting more and more antsy. When 15 had passed, I turned to Chris. Left or right? He looked at me, startled. What path? Left or right? Dude, what are you talking about? We can't leave Jake. Jake's gone. I don't know how or why he seems to think it's funny to leave us here, scaring us half to death. I took a deep breath. We gotta get back to our cars. Leave his pack there. When he wants to stop scaring the shit out of us, he can catch up. Chris paused for a long, tense moment before sighing. Yeah, okay. He looked over at the two paths in front of us. Look down the left and see if it looks familiar. I'll look down the right. I nodded and walked towards the left path. Chris and Luke began towards the right, looking down to try and find some indication that was the right path. I walked to the first marker on the left. I couldn't understand why there were suddenly two paths. It didn't make any damn. I stilled. In front of me, a line of wet red had dripped down from the triangle. I watched it gleam, wet, in the setting sun. This marker was new. And now that I was closer to it, I could smell the tang of copper. My heart seized in my chest and I quickly cut across the paths to Chris and Luke, who were discussing their trail. They turned to me as I approached. I think this might be it. Both sides of the tree are marked the same way it was when we. It's this one. The other, I sucked in a ragged breath. The other one's fresh. Fresh? The hell you mean? Chris started. I cut him off. The dash wasn't painted. The red is wet. It's fresh. Someone painted a new path with the same marker? That's so messed up. Why the hell would? Chris. It's not paint. Luke, who had been watching the exchange, cut in. What do you mean it's not paint? What else would it? I could see the moment it clicked for him. Chris was too tense in realization. Is this some kind of joke? You and Jake? He asked, voice dangerously low. I whirled on him, almost hissing in rage. You think I'd plan something like this? With him of all people? The bastard can't even look at me without a comment on how shit I am at everything. The only reason he even lowered himself enough to pass me an invite is because he knew the two of you would want me to come along. And you think of what? Plan some scary haunted trail. Even as I said it, I knew he didn't. Neither of them did. They both just wanted some rational explanation for all of this. I pushed past Chris to check the trail marker. I got close and checked it. My heart stopped. It was wet. I turned back towards the clearing we were in before, charging across towards the markers we had been following. Wet, wet, wet. All tinged with a coppery smell we'd been marching by too quickly to notice. I turned back towards Chris and Luke, and saw Chris was right behind me. They're all wet, he asked, wrinkling his nose as the smell hit him. We shared a glance, looking at the triangle nearest to us. Now what? I couldn't help but wonder. Here we were, in a rapidly darkening forest, lost without anyone who was even slightly familiar with the area. I've got a compass in my pack, Chris answered. He set his pack on the ground and rummaged through it for a while before triumphantly pulling out the instrument. Jake had his on him when he went up that tree, but I have my own. He pointed in a direction off to our right. South is that way. If we go that direction, we should get close to the road. As long as you and I and Luke stay close together, we'll be fine. I nodded and turned towards where Luke was. You hear that? We'll be fine. We just stick together and... Luke was gone. Nausea slammed into me, turning my limbs into goo. Chris wildly looked around, calling for Luke. I grabbed onto his sleeve, terrified. Chris, I said, keeping my voice low. He stopped his frantic yelling and looked at me. Chris, we need to get to the road and get back to our cars. Matt, we can't just leave Luke here. Jake knows this place, but Luke dash. Chris, we get to the car and we go somewhere with a signal and call the cops. They can come out here with dogs and search and rescue teams. But for right now, we have to go. I could see him internally fighting a battle, but in the end he nodded. I kept a hold of his sleeve as he led us south. The woods finally got dark enough that I grabbed the flashlight with my free hand. Chris went to grab his too, but I stopped him. I've got the light. You keep leading us straight. He didn't fight me. He just nodded and continued leading us. Finally, I could see something between the trees. The road. I could hear Chris give a little sigh of relief and we both started walking a little faster. Where's the other path to go off to? Another part of the lake. A voice called behind us. We stopped. Dread crawled up my spine as Luke's voice washed over me. Chris was about to turn and call when I let go of his arm and covered his mouth. He looked at me, angry, when the voice came again. Jake? What way do we go? I felt a whimper crawl up my throat. I met Chris's eyes and jerked my head in the direction of the road. He nodded. We crept forward, taking care to keep our steps as light as possible. Behind us, sounding like he was wandering the forest, Luke's voice continued. The nausea increased tenfold as I realized it was just repetitions of things he had said earlier. The road ahead of us was clearer than ever, and as if heaven itself was lighting the way, it was lit in a soft golden glow. Chris broke free of my grasp and ran forward. The crunching of leaves and sticks beneath him caused the voice to stop, and suddenly the sound of something barreling through the trees made its way to my ears. I sprinted after Chris, unwilling to turn and see what was behind us. We broke from the tree line, scared to death. The noise behind us didn't slow down. Run across the road. Run. I called, not even slightly slowing. I vaguely noticed that the light seemed to be getting brighter, but I ignored it in favor of sprinting harder. Chris cleared the road, and I was right behind him. I heard an odd noise, almost like brakes squealing. I spun around in time to see something big behind us get thrown forward across the road as a car slammed into it. My jaw dropped as everything seemed to come to a stop. The car was dented on the hood, and its driver stumbled out, confused. I didn't hesitate. Neither did Chris. We ran up to her, urging her back into the car. I think she caught sight of what it was she hit, because she just faintly told us to get in the back. We clambered in as she put the car in reverse and turned the car around. She started the car back towards town, and I couldn't help but stare out the back window. As the driver took a turn and the thing was going out of view, I saw it twitch and begin to rise up. The driver's name was Eve, and she was trying to head home from a work trip in another city. She'd been passing through by pure happenstance, and was grilling us on what the hell that thing was. A deer? An elk? A moose? It's awful far down south for moose, but damn if that sucker wasn't big. I just asked her to drop us off at the police station. She looked back at us, confused, but said that was fine. I closed my eyes. When we got there, we told them the whole story. They obviously had some questions, and I knew they didn't believe us on multiple parts. They told us not to leave town and that they'll have some more questions for us later. They took us up in the morning to get our cars. When we got to the spot we'd parked, the cops looked just as baffled as Chris and I had felt this whole trip. Every window of all 4 cars was shattered. The tires were slashed with great big gashes, and the trunks had been ripped open by force. Luke's car even had a door ripped off its hinges, the offending piece of metal bent out of shape a few yards away. The cops just took us home. They never found Jake or Luke. Chris and I still keep in touch every now and again. I think that trip put a strain on our friendship. Eve and I, meanwhile, got a whole lot closer. So close, in fact, she's right here beside me as I type this. I don't know what's prompting me to recall this. Maybe some form of exposure therapy or a way to get it off my chest. I'm not sure. All I know is that I'm never going camping again. Story 11. The apartment that smelled like death. I moved to New York 3 months ago. Got a job at a finance company. Typical 9 to 5. You know how it is. I'm from Portland, Maine. Packed what I could fit in a suitcase and rented the cheapest place I could find. 6th floor walk-up. Tiny windows. No sunlight. Just a small apartment that smelled like dust and old paint. The kind of place you tell yourself, it's just temporary, but you end up staying anyway. Because if you keep looking for other places to stay, the stress will end up eating you from inside out. The first few weeks were normal. Boring. Wake up. Shower. Put on the same shirt. Coffee doesn't even taste like anything anymore. Go to the big office in the big city. Sit at my desk. Answer emails. Smile when people walk by. No one asks how I'm doing. FaceTime with my girlfriend after work. She's still in Maine. How's the new place, love? Are you getting used to it? It's fine. You sound tired. Doing my best. I still can't grasp the concept of office work. Don't burn yourself out, okay? I'll try. The apartment is small. It's cold, even in summer. The walls don't make any noise. Which was weird for New York, I guess. The smell of dust was getting heavier. One day on my day off, I decided to clean the whole place. Mopped the floors. Scrubbed every corner. Got rid of all the dust. For a while the air felt better. But then came the smell of rot. I checked the fridge. Nothing rotten. No leaks. No mold. Then it went away. At work, people started stepping back when I got in the elevator. At lunch, Mark left a bottle of deodorant on my desk. I asked him why. He didn't answer. Just stared at the floor. FaceTime again. Nick, you look pale. Probably bad lighting. I feel fine. Are you losing weight? I don't know. Don't have a scale here. Do I look like I'm losing weight? She bit her lip. Do you go outside? I go to work. That's not the same. I looked at the screen, but I couldn't answer. She started whimpering. I think she was crying, but the Wi-Fi cut out before I could be sure. That night, I saw it for the first time. Long legs. It was hunched over because the ceiling was too low. It kind of looked like me trying to crawl near my bed, that damn incline near the roof floor. I stared at it. It stared at me with its white eyes. I realized it had no feet, just floating an inch off the ground. Neither of us moved. I was too scared to move. I got up at 4:12 a.m. and I couldn't sleep. The smell was gone. It was too. But my toothbrush tasted like blood. I checked my gums. They were fine. At work, they stopped sitting near me. In the break room, someone said, "Smells like he's rotting." I turned around, just to see them smiling at me. FaceTime again. "Nick?" "Yeah." "Have you been sleeping?" "I don't think so." "Are you feeling alive?" "I'm trying to be." She didn't answer. It got closer. I could see it better. Its arms, they were a part of its chest. Folded in, no stitches there or melted shut. It was smiling, but its eyes were terrified. I drifted back to sleep. I was used to it being there by then. I woke up and it was by the bed. Still smiling. Still terrified. It whispered, "Rot suits you." I stopped showering. I was feeling tired and I felt like it didn't matter anymore. My arms felt heavy. Like they weren't cooperating. I practiced moving my fingers in front of the mirror. They were slower. After a few days, someone got fired at work. It was my fault. My mind was full. I don't know what I was thinking. I remember it being like full static in my head. I misplaced some files and someone took the blame for it. I was sitting in the meeting room alone. My manager knocked but didn't come in. "You doing okay, bud?" I didn't answer, just nodded even without looking at him. "Good." He left. She called again. "Nick, sniff your shirt." I laughed. "Please." So I did. I smelled like death. I gagged. Almost puked but managed to hold it in. That was the first time I could smell it, really smell it. She paused. I tried to ask her, "How did you know?" But before I could finish, she said, "I can smell it too." It stood by the bathroom door. When I brushed my teeth, I saw it behind me. Its voice was soft, like it was telling me a secret. "You can't help." It was right. I couldn't lift my arms today. They just hung there, like useless flaps of meat. I opened my mouth in the mirror. There was something behind my teeth. They moved my desk away from everyone else. I thought, I'm surely getting fired soon. Everyone gave me weird looks throughout the day. Mark walks by but doesn't look at me. I asked him how his day was. He didn't even answer. Then he left. I didn't answer her call tonight. She left a voicemail. "I saw you in my sleep today. You looked like you were smiling. But your eyes weren't." She told me to get out. Take a break. Call my parents. Find a therapist. But it was too late. After hearing her message, I looked in the mirror. My eyes were whiter and my pupils were gone. Just like his. And I was smiling. But I couldn't feel it. I tried to pack my bag. My fingers don't close right anymore. He appeared behind me while I tried. His breath smelled like death. "You. I don't think this thing is a ghost. I think it's me. Or at least it's what I am becoming." I knew I was doing wrong. I knew I was letting everything rot. My life, my job, my relationship. I could have stopped. Even if people didn't offer any help, I could have sought it. I didn't. I kept going. Now it's closer than ever. I decided, fuck my stuff, I just need to get out of here. But I couldn't leave. I mean that literally. When I reached for the door, the smell hit me so hard I puked. My hands wouldn't work right. Then I fell down. I heard my feet break. When I looked down, all I saw was a pool of blood and thousands of bone shrapnel trying to escape my skin and muscle tissue. But I don't know if I can compare it to the pain of my teeth breaking from the inside out and rapidly rotting and cutting the insides of my mouth. Nobody helps. They see you breaking and they look away. That's fair. I would have done the same. Back in Maine, my grandfather used to say, "If you let rot sit long enough, it grows teeth." Now I know what he meant. If you're reading this, don't bother messaging me. I'm probably not here anymore. Or if I am, I'm not leaving this apartment. My fingers started to look like they've melted in acid while I'm typing this. The screen is all bloody. I can't move my arms right. But I feel like I had to post this. All I want to say before I hit post or before I die is, I'm sorry. To myself. Story 12. My university hostel has a new roommate. I don't think it's human. I'm a student at the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. I stay in one of the student halls on campus. It's basically a shared hostel. 4 of us sleep in one room. If you've ever lived in a place like that, you know it's never quiet. There's always noise, people shouting, music playing, or someone dragging their chair across the floor at 1 a.m. You learn to live with it. I sleep on the top bunk of a metal bed. The girl who sleeps below me is always out like a light. The fan barely works and the beds are old. They creak if you move the wrong way. But I adjusted. At least I thought I did. One night, I started hearing a strange creaking sound. At first, I assumed it was the bed. But this creak was different. Slower. Steadier. It would start around 2 or 3 in the morning. Like something rocking back and forth. The first few times, I tried to ignore it. But it kept coming back. Every night. And every night, it got louder. What made it worse was that I couldn't figure out where the sound was coming from. Sometimes it felt like it was under the bed. Other times near the locker. Sometimes right beside me. But the moment I moved, it stopped. I started lying still for long periods, holding my breath, just listening. It made my skin crawl. One morning, I asked the girl on the bottom bunk if she'd heard anything during the night. She looked confused. No. I sleep like a log. Why? I told her about the creaking. She laughed and said, maybe it's just the old bed. Or maybe, she smirked, you've got an extra roommate. It was a joke. But the way she said it, that her eyes didn't quite match her smile. Like she didn't fully believe it was a joke. I laughed along. But that night, I started sleeping with my phone under my pillow. A few days later, the sound came back. I sat up quietly and leaned over the edge of my bunk. The others were asleep. Everything looked normal. There's a lot of space under the bottom bunk. My bunk has nothing underneath, but hers does. It's always dark under there. I don't even know why I decided to check. I just needed to know. I grabbed my phone and pointed the flashlight down. Before I even turned the light on, something moved. A shadow. Fast and low. It darted across the floor under her bed. I jerked back so quickly I hit my head on the metal frame. My heart was pounding. I didn't say anything. I just lay back and stared at the ceiling. The creaking stopped. The next day, I told the other girls. They laughed, of course. One of them said, we've got a ghost in our room now? We all laughed. Even me. I didn't want to seem paranoid. But something about laughing at it, inviting it in like that, felt wrong. Because that's when everything changed. It started showing itself. Not clearly. Just little things. Quick glances. Movements you second guess. One night, I was half asleep when I saw a figure walking across the room. From the bathroom door to the window. I thought maybe someone had woken up to pee. But when I turned my head, all 3 girls were in bed. Then it turned to face me. That was the first time I experienced sleep paralysis. My eyes were open. I could see. I could breathe. But I couldn't move. Not even a finger. It stood at the foot of my bed. I couldn't see its face, but I knew it was watching me. Then it ran at me. It didn't walk. It charged. And right before it reached me, I woke up gasping, like someone had slammed their hand into my chest. After that, it kept coming. Sometimes, it sits at the edge of the bed. Sometimes it's right on top of me. I feel the pressure, the cold, the weight. I try to scream, but nothing comes out. Other times, I wake up and see it perched on the bottom bunk. Its knees pulled to its chest. Its arms are long and bent the wrong way. Just staring at me. And it always knows when I'm awake. And when it does, it runs towards me. Every time. What scares me the most is that it's always the same. Same shape. Same height. Same way of moving. People say sleep paralysis shows you random things. But this one isn't random. It's the same every time. Now I see it during the day. When I nap. When I blink too long. Once, I saw it in the tap's reflection in the shared bathroom. I don't know what it wants. But I know it got stronger when I started noticing it. And now, my roommate says she hears the creaking too. She doesn't laugh anymore. We sleep with the light on. But I don't think that helps. Last night, I saw it crouching beside her bed. It turned its head slowly towards me. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. But I swear, I felt it crawl back under her bed. And I don't think it's leaving. Story 13. I inspected the Svalbard seed vault in Norway. There are 31 subfloors. Throwaway for obvious reasons. I've tried posting about this on other subs' different accounts, but the posts always get buried or disappear. I know someone here will believe me. I work for Nordgen. We do monthly inspections of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. It's basically a doomsday backup for the world's plant or crop life, frozen seeds stored in case of catastrophe. I've been doing this for 6 years. It's routine, humidity checks, air pressure, frost integrity. Nothing weird. I do it with a colleague named Ever from Crop Trust. I've been doing inspections with Ever for a few years now. He's a good guy. Smart, calm, easy to work with. We occasionally hang out after shifts, grab food and shoot the shit. Last month during a standard inspection, Ever veered off. Said he had to check something and walked through a steel door I swear I'd never seen before. Before it closed, I caught a glimpse of an elevator. Just a single button, down. I finished my duties and waited. I'm not allowed to leave without him. 10, maybe 15 minutes passed. Eventually curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door and pressed the button. It took a while, and when it finally opened, the smell was vile. Not cold storage or mildew. Meat left in the sun. The elevator had a full panel, 31 sublevels. I've never been told there was anything below the vault chamber. The seed banks are all accounted for in the public schematics. So what the hell is all that space for? I backed away. A few minutes later, Ever came out looking pale, like genuinely sick. Like he'd seen something awful. He looked at me, locked eyes, and mumbled something. I said, "Pardon?" He spoke just a little louder this time, but trembling. "Did you see the elevator?" I hesitated, which made it abundantly obvious. I didn't even get a word out before he screamed, "He knows. He knows. You fool." I just stood there, frozen. He's never raised his voice to me. He's always been calm, cheerful. We're friends for fuck's sake. This wasn't him. As we exited the tunnel, I tried to apologize, to ask what was going on. He didn't look at me. I said, "Ever, just talk to me, man, please." He turns towards me, heads down, and whispers. Whispers so quietly I could barely hear it. One word, "Drog." My whole body tensed. My heart raced immediately. The word. I hadn't heard it since I was a kid. My brother used to try and scare me with those dumb old Norse ghost stories, Draugr, the dead who walk beneath the ice. What the fuck is beneath the vault? Are Crop Trust in on it? Or just Ever? I can't sleep, my mind is racing. Not sure when I'll get answers though. My supervisor called last night, says next month's inspection is postponed. Ever is missing. As I'm finishing typing this, I see a delivery guy pull into my driveway. "Park on the street, you fucking asshole." Envelope. No return address. Inside, just an unlabeled flash drive. Am I dumb enough to put this thing in my computer? Story 14. The island. The engine gave one final, choking sputter before the boat knocked against the decrepit dock. Now it was just a matter of getting my bags to the house. Rico had always been the working hub of the island, first to greet arrivals, and last to send them off. Though I suppose that might have changed now that the local ferry had cancelled service here, rerouting instead to the more developed islands nearby. A shame really. I still carry vivid memories of arriving by ferry in the summer months. Transit used to be an entire sunny day of anticipation. Wake early for the 2-hour drive to Bristol. Devour Boston cream donuts while mom and dad sipped coffee. Browse the comic book shop and pick out just one, issue of Omni magazine while we wait for the ferry's horn to summon us. Then 2 hours on the sea, watching the minuscule island swell into shape, counting the cottages east of the old McAllister place until ours finally revealed itself on the shoreline. There were only 12 cabins on Watchman's Island. None of them had electricity, at least not when I was a kid. Maybe they've since installed solar panels, maybe even Starlink. I really hope not. The island's charm lay in its simplicity, in the hush of a place untouched. Nights softened by crickets and the hiss of gas-powered Coleman lanterns cooling against the dark. It's been over 13 years since my last visit. I truly hope it's all still the same. If so, it should start with Rico. He should have heard the boat come in, should be on his way to the dock now in the island's lone vehicle. That old pickup of his had hauled generations of families and their belongings from boathouse to cottage. It was tradition. It was how things were done. Rico was a man out of time. A man of indistinguishable background, also a man very likely to be just recently out of the bottle. He had the kind of dark complexion that led people to guess he was of Italian or possibly Greek descent. But really, his color was more like that of a roofer left baking in the sun for 30 years, sustained daily on wild turkey. There was always half an inch of gray stubble across his weathered chin, always a bit of a swagger, and often a stagger, to his gait. And always the same murmured drawl, recycled from years of repeated conversations echoing through the island's silence. I'd never thought to ask where he wintered. Surely he didn't stay here. Rico was in the boathouse, stalwart against the flow of time. He lay curled in the corner where the earthen wall met the floor, perfectly at ease on a bed of bat and owl guano. Blissfully asleep in the last patch of shade lingering inside the sun-beaten, crumbling structure. It took some effort to wake him, at least enough to get a response. But the moment his eyes cracked open, there was recognition, however muddled, waiting there. "Farnworth," he mumbled, rising slowly. He stretched, then began shambling his rail-thin frame toward the dirt path. I'm not entirely sure he recognized me, exactly, more likely he identified my lineage. I had inherited my father's curly black hair and my grandfather's solid build. Rico had known them both, at least for a few weeks each summer. The man's presence spoke of age, of old, untreated injuries, and a life lived hard and alone. He was the very image of a New England swamp Yankee, in its purest form. But his right leg told a different story, something darker, something I couldn't quite place. It looked as if a potato-sized chunk of his calf was simply gone. Not cut away, but taken. The surrounding flesh was rotting. There's no better word for it. A dark, wet mess of weeping tissue, threaded with something fungal, something that reeked. Yes, I suggested he see a doctor. More than once. But all he offered in return were slurred and twisted variations of, "Good now," "sorted it." Rico had been slipping even 20 years ago, but the decline since then was unmistakable. We got into his 1960s farm truck, more rust than metal, and started our short journey. Rico wasn't much for conversation, so I just listened to branches scraping along the sides and let myself drift into old memories. I also tapped my front pocket, as I had done every time I transitioned from one form of transport to another that day, just waiting for my casually clandestine meetup. Still there. Still got them. As expected, the path was almost completely overgrown, forcing us off the road more than once. Each time, branches tore at my arms through the side of the cab. The truck hadn't had windows for as long as I could remember. Welts rose where the branches struck, and the sting brought on a wave of nausea. I nearly lost my stomach when Rico slammed the brakes and we both lurched forward like synchronized headbangers. There was a hole in the middle of the road. As wide as a man. A year ago, when I still had a 36-inch waist, I might have been able to crawl into it myself. Must be a sinkhole, I thought. But it wasn't just deep, it extended off to the side. More like a badger den, except this was far too big. "Quarter." Rico held out his wiry, vein-laced hand, and I just stared at it. "Quarter. Got one." I fished around in my pocket and handed one over, mumbling, "Of course," unsure why he was asking. He took the coin, creaked the door open, stepped out, and flicked it into the hole. I twisted in my seat to watch him as he pulled 2 weathered wooden slats from the bed of the rusty beast and dragged them over the opening. Then he climbed back in and eased the truck forward, rolling us across the makeshift bridge. What was that about? I asked before I realized that I did not really expect, or perhaps even want, an answer. The island's been troubled. Holes opening. Overrun by the wilds. People stopped coming when the ferry stopped, and things went backward. I suppose to where they were before people. Before we came with machines, in order, cellular phones, and the like. Luckily I remember the old ways. Gran Ernestis taught me the ways as a tyke. How to offer up, how to draw ya lines. Make ya space. Good for it to Keep at it. I see, I replied meekly. I did not see. But encouragement would likely just encourage continued incoherent mutterings. The remaining 10-minute ride passed in silence. We pulled up in front of the cabin, Rico swinging the truck around beside the old well pump. Now comes the toll. I'm a wealthier man than my father ever was, and a good deal more generous. I paid Rico well, 2/5 of mid-shelf whiskey. Handing him a top-shelf scotch would have been like pouring it straight into that hole we crossed earlier. Still, I had one more bottle tucked away for the return trip. He accepted the offering like a 17-year-old, half-blind, limping dog eyeing a slab of meat dropped on the floor. He lingered outside until I'd unlocked the front door, then turned and shuffled off either to his own ramshackle cabin or back to the dock to wait for a ferry that hadn't come in years. It takes all types, I thought. Inhale. That deep, musky smell of mildew and charred firewood from a long-forgotten burn. Creosote and bug spray. The sweet, sour stink of moldering books. A scent like memory turned to rot. The state of the cabin was worse than expected. Unhindered wood rot. Sagging floors covered with carpets, which were quite moist with something closer to fish oil than seawater. The rising smell from the threadbare carpet was the worst of it, though. Nearly unidentifiable in its soupy assault upon the senses. It clung to the nostrils, sweet and meaty like spoiled broth, unplaceable, but intimately wrong. It also appeared that some clever creature had gained full access. In the corner of the common room, to the left of the wood stove, was a nested hole. Surrounded by bits of dried woven grass and straw, its opening perhaps only 2 inches across. My first thought was rats, but I'd never known of a rat nesting quite like that. Groundhog? Gopher? Squirrels? I'm not sure I had ever seen any on the isle before, though my preteen attentions were unhindered by documenting the local fauna. I withdrew the satchel from my pocket and placed it beside my bed, safe and sound. Its contents hidden away, swathed in black velvet, until I could meet the dodgy buyer in Bristol next week. I started on cleaning up the bedroom so that I could sleep comfortably and not awaken struggling to breathe through the allergens accumulating over the years past. Then I set my sights on closing that little entryway in the corner. Nocturnal visitors would find their welcome revoked this evening. 3 teeth. 3 of them. I found them when pulling apart the wreath-shaped burrow in the corner. Each tooth was buried deeper in the assemblage than could be seen at first glance, and scattered evenly around the hole. They were too big to be rat teeth. They were also too rectangular. They resembled human teeth but were clearly too small and strangely shaped. Smooth and clean. As if they had been waiting for me. Presented. I put aside speculation on that point and finished the job, just in time for tea at sundown. I enjoyed both on the front porch and pondered whether or not I would wait here for the stars as I listened to the sound of the sea retreating and returning, over and over, with varied effort but constant music. That was when I first saw him. The boy. Just for a second. He was peering through the bushes to the west of the clearing with a big smile on his face. 2 things struck me about him. Well, perhaps 3. The shirt he wore was familiar, not the shirt itself, but the style. It was one of those 1970s muted, striped shirts, with a dark collar and sleeves. Secondly, and more starkly, I noticed that his smile was lacking. Not only lacking in mirth, but also lacking 3 teeth. Evenly spaced gaps in his twisted mouth. The third thing I noticed, I'm not sure how to express. An overall feeling of distance. Almost like this boy did not quite fit here, in this place, not comfortably. Like his very existence was the result of much effort. As though the world was holding its breath just to allow him space to appear. Yesterday, I would have thought I was mad, but I've recently learned that trust, in your strange impressions, may just save your life. The boy leaned over, picked up a wooden crate, and was gone in a flash. No branches swayed. No leaves were disturbed. And no sound was made. He was just gone. I knew it was worthless to try to follow or find him. In fact, I wanted nothing more than to simply forget what I had seen. But I was not able to convince myself that it was a hallucination. Instead, I lit the little gas lantern and ran my finger down the spines across the bookshelf, tilting my head and reading snippets of titles. Strange Land, Man Myth, Of the Rose, Mountains of, Mailman, all familiar. All striking a note not quite right for my mood. These were titles waiting for another reader. Then I touched upon a plain black spine, which turned out to be a thin journal. One I did not recognize but seemed rather old, given the penmanship. It was neither dated nor signed and only contained a single attempt at a poem. Maybe more of a limerick. Johnny Jackrabbit crossed the way. Johnny Jackrabbit had no say. The machines crushed him. The boy carried him. Then Johnny started to play. Oh, that was another book off the reading list. I cursed myself when I opened my phone out of boredom and indecision, and decided a nightcap and a good solid sleep would be just the thing to settle. It turns out I would be allowed to enjoy neither. Halfway through finishing the pour on a tumbler of rather nice cognac, I heard the scratching. Construction had already begun on a new bypass through the rags and wood glue I had plugged the varmint entrance hole with. My makeshift bastion was completed not just 30 minutes ago, but life could be pervasive in the strange lands outside the cities. I knocked the broom handle against the walls around the entrance, first tentatively and then vigorously as necessity required, resulting in no change in the veracity of the intruder. I ran out the front door to the back corner of the house to try to locate the creature. Unsuccessful, I beat the broom handle around the propane tank loudly and soaked in the resulting silence, before returning to the kitchen, victorious. Then it began again. If the furred fiend was going to be that avuncular, perhaps we should meet face to face. I lowered myself first to my knees, and then flat on my belly. Eye level now, I watched the cloth twitch and quiver as the ravenous gnawing continued. At this point, I was beyond being curious about what genus of rodent had been living in my inherited vacation home. Instead, I smiled, imagining how it would react to coming through and finding itself face to face with a pink-skinned monster 10 times its size, staring it directly in the eyes. My makeshift plug trembled and was soon partially pulled away. And there it was, that little black nose just starting to poke through the newly cleared passageway. A mole? Its work continued, and the crevice widened. Through the growing opening, the animal's face twisted back and forth, tugging and gnawing. A green eye flashed for a second as it tore another strip away. The teeth. They looked like little ladders. A badger? A skunk? I could not recall seeing teeth like that in any guidebook or nature documentary. My questioning and theorizing stopped, and reaction took control as 3 long skeletal legs crowded their way through the opening alongside the peeking face. Dark, black, and insectoid appendages worked alongside the body of the furry, gnashing, green-eyed something. As I said, reaction had superseded rational thinking. I was up and throwing my drink at the creature as best I could through the opening, and immediately launched one of my Coleman lanterns, the one currently lit, into flight. Fire did the work that I hoped the intimidation and astringent drink would have. A rueful yelp accompanied the vermin's exit, and I was left to quell the remaining flames. The scent of scorched fur lingered long after the creature had fled. Before crawling into bed, I shook off the experience by lifting the little velvet bag on my bedside table and once again thought, this is freedom. As always, my finger dwelt over the knot of string, keeping it tightly closed. 5 million at least. This was independence. The race was over. I had won. I do have that. I found the lingering smell of burning to be strangely pleasant as I lay my head upon the pillow and tried to reach those Elysian fields of slumber. But sleep was not to come. Only a parade of mosquito bites, rodent migrations, unidentifiable house noises, and other strange cries from the wood out back, along with a growing unease about the next few days before my meeting. I was not alone in this place. The following day seemed to come to an end just after sunrise. I could list the things that I had accomplished. I could account for each estimated hour in retrospect. I could accept that perhaps I had sat by the water for 3 hours, not 1. But then the light was simply gone. The sky darkened without warning, and a cold gale surged in from across the ocean like a pungent breath, rich and knowing. The wind brought other things as well. Or perhaps the boy had instead arrived upon the spreading darkness, rather than the change in atmospheric conditions. Regardless, I saw him again. Plain as day. At the very edge of the Brentworth property, carrying that same wooden box down the beaten path leading back to the boathouse. This time, I set aside my discomfort and resolved to approach the experience in a more rational way. Slipping into my jacket, I began to quietly trail him. Trying to get the boy's attention or attempting to call out to him would have been even more rational. But I could not ignore the voice that told me it also would have been fruitless. And perhaps worse than that. Instead, I obeyed this internal directive and simply followed. I watched his small frame sway and stumble, albeit without noise or disturbance to the stones at his feet or the flora he brushed along the way. He drifted, not walked, skimming the ground like a marionette on slack strings, shimmering at the edges of perception as twilight retreated. I managed to keep pace, though, and eventually found myself with further company. The boy stopped and knelt at the hole in the road that I had crossed just the day before. I'm not sure if he was aware of joining another visitor who had preceded his arrival. Rico was bent over the opposing edge of the pit, also on his knees, pouring the whiskey I had given him into that impossible hollow like it was a libation to some silent, watching thing. The boy followed. He leaned over, pulled a long, gray, and quite dead hair from the box, and lowered it into the hole, sobbing silently. Without warning, I found myself on my knees as well, as the world turned and the earth twisted beneath my poorly rooted feet. It felt like what any New Englander thinks an earthquake would feel like. Although it was accompanied by a guttural cacophony and a stench reminiscent of wet copper and turned fish. Rico must have departed before I regained my balance. Neither he or the wandering phantom remained. It was just me and the hole, here beneath the peering stars. This was not my first dark hole. 12 years ago, I stared down another abyss. A cancer scare, what most would consider a midlife crisis, a bloodthirsty divorce, a home foreclosure, and more. Wait, there's more. I had fought my way through with action and perseverance, leading eventually to the little satchel containing 3 quite rare pink diamonds I carried with me now after their long journey from China, through Jordan and then Antwerp in payment for my hard work. Though I suppose the work itself was not recognized by the purchaser. Only the plethora of sensitive data transmitted in the opposing direction. Regardless, I managed to recover and eventually completely reverse my financial situation by taking action, digging in, and fighting. So I decided once again on this proven method. Just to do something about it. I trucked back to the cabin grounds, grabbed a shovel out of the shed beside the outhouse, and returned to fill it. It took more than an hour, leaving me dusty and sweaty, but I headed back more than a little drunk on pride. That was the last thing I clearly remember before regaining consciousness to find myself half buried and being devoured, tearing at my skin, my mind, taking me apart piece by piece. I now understand what had happened. Arriving home in the dark, I slipped on an accumulation of sand covering the steps of the porch. I must have rung my bell of the clothesline post on my way down, sending me into an unintended slumber. When I awakened, it was like surfacing through anesthesia. Gasping, thick-headed, and not entirely certain I had returned to the same world I left. Confusion could not, however, explain why I was half buried in sand and soil. Nor did it explain why the remaining exposed parts of my body were being pinched and pulled at. I clawed out of my shallow grave to scare the creatures off. They were shelled like beetles but with mangy, furry faces and rat-like teeth. The critters had managed to take 2 pebble-sized chunks from my flesh before finally retreating into the underbrush. And I could already see angry red and matching blue-gray tendrils beginning to crawl up the veins on my belly and shoulder. A 15-year scotch was all I had to treat the wounds. Such a waste. At some point while dabbing myself with an alcohol-doused rag, I began to consider my situation. The sands I had awoken beneath very much resembled the earth I had displaced the previous night. There was no questioning that. My more analytical voice countered and pointed out that most of the soil on the island was quite the same. Tired from the lack of sleep and woozy from the injury, I still managed to soldier myself out to the hole. And confirmed that yes, it was now cleared of my fill, and gaping once again. That was when I decided I'd had enough. I would return to my condominium in Boston, stop at an urgent care center, and soak my disbelief away on my heated floors and in my steaming jacuzzi. I was out the door in no time. Having no way to contact Rico, the man had never in his life had a working telephone, I hauled my bags up the path to the boathouse, careful to step widely around the dark pit. The way that things were unraveling for me, it will come as no shock that this plan for escape was bound to loosen and uncoil around my feet as well. Pull after pull, the outboard motor would not start. I checked the electrical connections, spun the propeller to ensure it was not seized, and opened the gas cap to check the fuel level. I found it completely full. Full of sand. Got to be fucking kidding me. Under my breath, I looked around, finding no other vessel docked, no other hope of salvation. I had no mobile reception. My transport was irreparably damaged. Just as my cabin had been compromised, I was exhausted, and I was growing increasingly nervous about my position. Rico was my only option. He might know if someone is scheduled to arrive in the coming days. He may have a boat of his own, moored elsewhere, out of sight. So I returned my things to mine and made the trek to his cottage. Rico's place sported the classic front yard of any good old American hoarder. A washing machine frame here, an antique armoire slowly dying under the rain and sun there. As children, we used to joke that anything you lost on the island, a coin, a button, even your own excrement, would eventually turn up in Rico's front yard. Things had changed, though. Rather than spare parts and furniture, the man's frontage was now surrounded by piles of components organized into what looked like modern artistic sculptures. He did not strike me as the type for a gallery showing, sharing cheese and wine with financial directors and other Los Angeles hoi polloi. But frankly, the structures were strangely compelling. There were perhaps 6 sentries in an arc around the front of this cabin. Peeking around back, I found the same pattern mirrored by another set. Luckily, Rico was home and opened the door wide. Though he got quite annoyed and cursed to himself when my entries spread a pile of salt into the room from the threshold, which he immediately swept back across the threshold with his hands, muttering something too softly to catch. "You come about her then." He shot at me as we sat and cracked open 2 Pabst Blue Ribbons. Noah. Children? I sat for a moment in dumb confusion, and he nodded to himself. "My boat. There's sand in the tank and the motor is busted." "Yahoo! Do you know if anyone is due to arrive soon? Any idea how I could get back to the port?" I didn't want to ask him directly, but my hope was that he would be able to run me back. Rico looked over his shoulder. "Selma's not run for 2 seasons now." I assumed he meant his little Oceana. Thompsons don't come anymore. Warnocks have not been here since the ferry stopped. The only... Not after last year. Reggie'll come Tuesday. Don't mind riding with the plastics, he'll take ya back. 3 more nights. The first 2 had gone rather badly, and I did not think that things would improve anytime soon. If I were really stuck here, I should probably stop interfering with whatever the hell was happening on this island. Stay away from that gaping hole. Maybe if I just stayed quiet, remained inside. Stop messing with things I could, blend. Rico did. Apparently. "Wrong with the motor? You said." He continued to look at his beer. "Sand." He scoffed. "Tried to fill the hole." Yes, I tried to fill it in and then... Jesus, he knew what was happening here. Then there was sand at my cottage and in my boat. I can't explain it. What's happening here? I scratched at the bandage on my arm and noticed the man's eyes twitch towards it and frown. Always gotta fix things. Improve, that's the word. Oh yeah. Like there's a proper way and you wanna make the whole world right. Your way. Sometimes there ain't no winning battle, know what I mean. Sometimes life digs a hole that canna be filled. The problem is, you think it can. I remained quiet, trying to follow. It's like here. They buy the summer homes, move in. Leave trash lives. Don't expect it changes things. Don't expect it's out of their control. And one day, the hole shows itself. Built up over time. Getting deeper with each lie. Each abuse. Every piece is dirt and trash. Soon it's deep enough for her. Soon she comes and makes things her way. You got 3 more days. Ya already bitten. Already got her attention. Best find something to give the, or get gone if you can. Like what? Like Suma you don't want to give a course. Swat we all like best. Suma undeserved. Stolen. Something hard to part with. It's why she came after all. Silence made space for itself then. Right about the time that my eyes settled on a small picture frame surrounded by dusty shells on the shelf behind Rico. A 10-year-old boy, missing a tooth but smiling energetically at the camera. The same boy I had seen for fleeting moments over the past few nights. Yours. I gestured to the photo. His eyes welled up immediately. Was ya? Good heart. Good boy. Too good for this wicked world. Too good to learn the old ways. Never should have taught him. At my lack of response, Rico told me the story of his son. The boy's mother, Rico's wife, had died when he was just 2 years old. I had never known Rico was married. He was always so singular. In the parental wisdom of the 80s. The obvious application for a wound like that was something small and furry. For little Sam, that was Johnny. Not just a white rabbit with crimson eyes, but an actual hare, carrying that wild blood that lengthened their frames and led to disproportionately large paws and pads. The boy took Johnny everywhere. They ate together, slept together, and at one point, little Sam actually set up a litter pan in the john so they could do their dirty, side by side, when nature called. At the time, life on the island was thriving. Large families were coming in weekly to summer, and newly adult children were taking a split of land from their families to build cottages of their own, for their new wives and in some cases children. And where there is a market, the locusts come. Santorini Development and Construction rolled their diggers, drills, and trucks right into the newfound gold mine. And in so doing, rolled a cement truck right over Johnny Rabbit on the way to yet another planned building site. Rico cried when he described the state of his boy at the time. Such a soft heart. Such a loving boy. Over and over again. The pain in Rico's voice makes it clear that it pulls at the man to this day. So Rico did what any father would. He took action. In this case, that meant teaching Sam what he called the old way. In essence, I took Rico's vague insinuations to mean that he taught his son how to bring Johnny back. To reunite them. With some obscure old local ritual. Rico was sure to tell me that he had never attempted it himself, but the knowledge was passed to him from his grandmother, a strange and ill-tempered woman by the sound of things. The moon was full when Sam placed the remains of Johnny into a wooden box and headed out into the night. He returned screaming that Johnny had run widdershins and then into the wood. Rico had some trouble understanding the boy due to the new gap between his teeth and the blood building in his mouth and throat. The tooth was right. There had to be an offering, Rico explained. And that particular tooth was due for an escape soon anyhow. What Rico hadn't realized was how generous and how desperate his son really was. That the boy would pay any price necessary for Johnny to return. Rico tried to have a conversation with the boy when he returned the next night with another missing tooth. And on the third, they fought something terrible, and the boy's arm had been dislocated when the argument became physical. Rico wept openly at this point in the retelling. And I understand why. It was the last time he saw his progeny. After his own violent transgression. Sam had crawled out of his window that evening, never to be seen again. But she's still here. The thing a boy fed and nurtured. The thing he loved. But that love is gone and she feels it. Every day. Hunger can't be explained. And you just defiled her home. Did I want to return to my cabin, alone, 10 minutes from nightfall? No, I did not. Was I going to beg Rico for a sleepover, like a 5-year-old, and ask him to make me dinner? Certainly not. When the conversation waned and the quiet took hold, I made my exit, thanking him for his time and company. I walked very slowly, in no rush at all, to my cabin and spent a few hours securing the doors and windows. I doused the burrow in the corner with the most noxious chemical sprays I could locate, and then kept watch through sunset on the front porch. As the darkness spread, I began to hear the sounds pick up on the wind. A distant deep drumbeat for 1, 2, 3 strikes, then silence. Scuttling in the bushes to the left and behind the house. A cry echoed in the trees, part anguish, part ecstasy, entirely unplaceable. Fully present and abundant here. Undeterred by pavement. Unfazed by cars and frantic human activity. This was held to be beautiful by many. from what I've seen and read in the poetic waxing of outdoorsmen. For me, it was just fodder for growing anxiety. How could I possibly do 2 more nights of this? The question was moot. The island had already decided for me. Dreams came before true sleep did. Flashes of images past and present. The night I spent sleeping off far too many drinks in a row-home doorway, penniless and just as aimless. The last few heated arguments with Pauline, before the divorce. Screaming every insult I could at the poor woman as she tugged at her hair. The pain of frantic nips on my skin just this morning. Flashes of the boy, Sam, kneeling before the yawning abyss, offering devotion to something far older than I could comprehend. The abysmal menagerie of memory was broken by yet another intrusion, and I was on my feet. My eyes adjusted to the almost pitch black. I ran out into the kitchen, trailing after the scrabbling sounds. What I could only assume were the rodents, once again working their way through my barrier. Then I realized that the sound was coming from several locations at once. There must have been 10 or more of them, scritching, scratching, tearing, and pulling with those needle teeth at the crumbling bastion of my inherited summer home. From every corner. My mind reverted to some Cro-Magnon place, and the solution it offered was singular. Fire. When the boma is under threat, fire is the last refuge of the frightened primate. I grabbed the largest candle I had brought and lit it in a rush, the flame trembling in the dark. Then, with a grin, I upped the ante, raising a can of Raid bug spray behind it. Makeshift blowtorch in hand, I took to defending the encampment. Whiskers were sung. The receding, squealing gave me a sense of satisfaction as I turned from the corner to other areas of encroachment. Running to the bathroom, I drenched the spaces between the pipes and the wall with flames and listened as the scrambling sounds spread lower and lower behind the walls. Rattling windows were treated similarly, and attempts to squeeze between the window frames ceased. One after another. Each trespass was quelled by the open flame. I continued in a frenzy, running from room to room in the darkness, avoiding obstructions and raining fire on my aggressors until the house began to accumulate more smoke than my lungs could comfortably manage. I looked over my shoulder while fleeing and noticed the obstruction outside the kitchen window. It was barely discernible in the darkness. If not for the fact that the moonlight was reflecting off the silver-coated tank behind the house. I saw an enormous brush of flesh and fur against the window pane before pushing straight through, shattering the glass and splintering the frame. A paw. The pad of an animal's foot. Muddy tendrils of fur and chipped, jagged claws were now probing across the countertop, struggling for purchase. A hair. It was a rabbit's paw that was clawing and searching for my pink flesh. Only the paw was the size of my head. And now it was tearing planks and siding from the exterior and interior wall of the kitchen. The creature had gained a foothold that I could certainly not repel with my makeshift weapon. Let him come, I would exit out front, under the sky. Somewhere with options. On my flight from the kitchen, I took note of the now brightly lit bathroom. Lit in orange and crimson. My mind whirled as I beelined for the door and finally accepted the reality of what I had seen. Red coals. Smoldering and smoking. 5 feet up the wall, threatening to burst at any moment. My little blowtorch had been more effective than I thought, too well in fact, and had set the crawlspace between the rooms alight. No matter, escape was the plan. Returning to the confinement of the cottage was no longer an option, regardless of the fire damage. Before reaching the door, I ducked into the bedroom to salvage only what I needed. I didn't even consider my luggage or cell phone, just the necessities. There was only one. I snatched the satchel of precious stones from my bedside table and was circling the house toward the path in seconds. For a moment, I had neglected to fully consider the gargantuan hair out back, and began frantically looking left to right when I realized its absence. The truth of the matter is that it had intuited my plan, stopped tearing into the cabin to gain access, and had simply lain in wait, hidden in the brush for the most fortuitous moment to pounce. I immediately found myself on my back, with a mouthful of moist and mildewy fur, fighting for my life. Curling to my left at the sharp pain of tearing skin, screaming, and all the while punching at random sinew and muscle, still clutching the velvet bag in my palm. The creature reared up to gain momentum for a descent that would certainly crush my skull against the stones, and I took the opportunity to free myself from its mildewy bulk. To rise up and face the monstrosity. Its eyes. Oh God, there was darkness there. Complex and endless entanglements of insanity. A universe of grinding, building, and chaotic pain. I wanted to be there. To live there. Like standing on a cliff and knowing that you desire to jump. Without warning, I was lifting myself from the ground 10 feet from the cabin, remarkably closer to my intended destination. Bleeding from the mouth, ears, arms, and God knows where else, I blocked my ears to stop the incessant ringing. The slate tile I had hurled had missed its target. Sailing past the devouring spirit, it had instead struck and breached the propane tank, which had been just outside the flames licking up the kitchen wall. I don't remember the blast itself, only the sudden relocation, the pain, the ringing. It mattered not. I fled, my escape route now within reach. The boathouse, while not more defensible than my cabin, was the bastion of the island. The central touchstone during periods of coming and going. And I was doing my best to go. It was also the most likely place to find Rico once the sun rose. And hell, if necessary, I could jump from the dock and tread water for as long as required. Could hares swim? I prayed not. Just before my lungs gave out, I was stopped dead in my tracks by the scene developing on the path before me. The boy, Sam. He was squatting in the middle of the way, crouched over and twitching as if he were frantically playing a flute. I slowly approached to see that, no, in fact, he was rooting around in his own mouth with a pair of pliers. Spelunking with that cold metal for another tooth, I suppose. Another offering. Even as tears grow at the corners of his eyes. Giving everything he can for the return of his childhood pet. And instead, unwittingly birthing the monstrosity that now stalked the island. The monster that was, at this very moment, casually approaching the opposite side of the abyss in the road, having managed to pass me through the wood. Shining the yellow light of his eyes upon the child's morbid offering, and then at me. Cold and ruthless clarity struck me then. A knowing beyond reason. The limitations of choice. The leveraging of loss. How one thing could cost another. My life as a whole melted down into a coin and weighed against the suffering of existence. The coin. The offering. It was the price of passage. If I could pay. If I wanted to survive. The black velvet bag rose before me, reaching eye level like a cosmic jellyfish, darker than the waters in which it swam. My head swam, and I was almost entirely disconnected from my body. I watched those fingers pull at the knots and turn the bag over as 1, 2, 3. 3 pink diamonds flashed in the starlight before sinking into the nothingness at my feet. Sam dove in after them first. The beast followed just a moment thereafter. I was left behind. In darkness. In silence. And for the first time in days, at peace. It's not so bad. The shower gets cold in under 3 minutes, and the kitchen faucet leaks more and more each time the repairman leaves. Still, I can live with it. I even met someone important to me, for the first time in years. And I actually expect it to last. I never told her this story, of course. She has such a pure heart, and I'd rather not put this particular spot of cyclopean darkness upon her lovely shoulders. I met her on a trip to the park, with a 4-year-old named Sam, strangely enough. Sam had lost both of his parents, not just one, unlike the island's Sam. I had joined the Big Brother program just a month after my escape from the island. I also volunteered at a soup kitchen. It wasn't a very lucrative way to spend my time, but somehow the horrors I'd lived through on that island served only to sharpen my awareness of the quieter horrors around us. The ones continually unfolding in plain sight. Sam is currently my crowning achievement in that regard. I was making a real difference to him. I could see that every day. Every time he opens up a little more, every time he lets me glimpse what he's been through. Every time he smiles, not because he's trying to please, but because he knows I see him. That he's not alone. I only wish that I could bear to take him to the zoo without breaking out in sweat at each whiff of wet fur. And that I had enough money to treat him to lunch. And I do worry that the old, half-blind cat that curls up with him in bed at the care home might not make it past the next winter. Story 15. What crawled out of me is not mine. My first kid, my Melody, was an accident. At least on my part. Sex education was bare bones at the time, doubly so in no man's land, the Midwest. I was 15 in 1993 and had just met Rhett, an older guy from Indiana State. I was enamored, he was charming, and now I have a 15-year-old daughter at 30 and Rhett could be in Timbuktu for all I care. I went from Junie, artist, drum major, human, tomboy, to mom. Just mom. I liked being mom, maybe it was a little teenage rebellion, to rub it into my own mother's face that it wasn't that fucking hard to be nice to something so small and helpless. Raising Melody was not easy, no matter the point I was trying to prove. I had to drop out of school, 'cause she decided to pop out early as shit, and God did she cry. She had lungs on par with a fucking opera singer, excuse my French. She was loud and annoying and I loved her with my entire chest. Ma helped raise her, to my confusion. I had thought she would kick me out but, apparently seeing her daughter in the same position she had been in 15 years prior must have tugged on her heartstrings. Her frayed, bare heartstrings. Didn't mean she was nice, but she treated Melody all right. The government assistance must have made it easier to swallow. Mel hardly looked like her father, thank God, taking after my stocky frame and wild red hair. She liked to sprint around like a cat, all fours, just ripping through the house. She's a little out of her gourd but she's wicked smart, and has me wrapped all round her finger. A few years later, I met Charlie. My car went to shit and he happened to be the only other person on the road at 7 a.m., offering a lift to the supermarket. He was in construction, having dropped out of school the same as I did. He didn't offer up why, and I never asked. He didn't talk much and I liked that. He was sweet, respected me and Mel, and provided. I think I might have loved him. So, we got married when Melody was 5, and eventually tried for kids. My heart wasn't in it, not really. It had been so long with just Mel and Charlie was just so introverted that didn't really change when he moved in. I didn't want to raise another baby so close to an empty nest. I wanted to be something other than mom. Even my fucking husband calls me mom. I don't think he's spoken directly to me in years. Only ever, what's mom thinking for dinner? To Mel. You can only deal with so many pressing comments from the man you live with before giving in seems worth it, even if just to shut him the hell up. Well, have you ever had a miscarriage? Have you had 6? Mel was a miracle baby, I guess. But despite the darkness, the depression that came with losing so many pregnancies, some part of me was relieved. Charlie was starting to give up. I am not trying to scare you, June. My doctor had told me, clasping our hands together. June, I was stuck on that. She had called me June. I almost forgot she was talking to me. Her hands were clammy and cold, bone and granite carved far too thin. I thought briefly of a bluebird. Dr. Georgia Maples was a kind woman, nosy and particular, but kind nonetheless. She helped me through my first pregnancy when my mother had refused to speak to me, let alone drive me anywhere. Sitting Melody down after she called Georgia, the name my mother had been pushing on the kid, in front of said mother and doctor, was something I did not want a repeat of. The shared smoke breaks with my mother that followed weren't much butter. But I urge you to look into other options. Another pregnancy is too much of a risk, too much strain on your body, she had pressed. I wish I could have pretended to put up more of a fight. After many tears shed, a stilted conversation with Charlie, and an ultrasound, a hysterectomy was the outcome. Can't make a cake without eggs. Eggs being eggs, cake being a baby. But here I am, 3 months pregnant. I had gone in for the flu and left with the news my fucking uterus grew back. Tubes and all. Dr. Maples had no answers, the surgeon had no answers, and the priest canceled the baptism. I was already too far along, according to the law, and the baby seemed to be relatively healthy, despite the fact I was supposed to have no reproductive organs. I had no choice but to ride this thing out. I guess I should have been happy, everyone told me to be happy, but a pervasive dread had coiled around my guts, cold and heavy and foreign. I felt disconnected from my body as it swelled and twisted to fit. The first trimester was noticeably rougher than with Melody. My stomach cramped and roiled at all hours of the day, and I was almost vomiting more than I ate. I had to frequently return to the hospital for intravenous fluids and vitamins, and Charlie had silently taken on more and more hours as I had been almost immediately bedridden, unable to continue at the salon. Vomiting every few minutes meant even leaving the house was off the table. Oh, there were the usual symptoms alongside mutated morning sickness on fucking steroids, but it was hard to notice while dry heaving for a month straight. Swollen feet had not bothered me because I could not stand. Cravings weren't an issue as eating was a chore at best. Melody would come talk to me during this. She stayed late sometimes, clearing out only when Dr. Maples popped in, and filled the space as soon as she left. Mel was in a bit of an angsty teen phase at the time, hair pinned across her forehead in a faux fringe, the darkest blue eyeshadow I owned smeared messily across her lids, clumpy mascara and nothing else. She would drop herself into my bed, shoes on no matter how many times I griped at her about dirt on the duvet. Most of her time was spent tapping away at her phone or furiously scribbling in her sketchbook, chattering in my general direction about anything she could think of. I had been dozing during a rant session when she cut herself off. "Mel?" I prompted. At the lack of an answer, I opened my eyes. Mel was staring down around my stomach in shock, then horror, and finally landing on disgust. Despite myself, I felt a pang of hurt. "What's wrong?" I prompted, trying and failing to sit up several times. She gaped like a fish for a solid few moments. I panicked and snapped. "Mel!" She startled and gripped her pencil, holding her sketchbook in front of her like a shield. "It moved," she yelled, ruffled, upset. "Your stomach moved." The second trimester came prematurely, almost 3 weeks earlier than the usual timeline. Dr. Maples was a frequent guest in my house at that point at her insistence, hooking me up, talking to me, and doing checkups. Everything looked fine, normal, grade even. No scarring, baby developing on time, if freaky fast. With more Dr. Maples came less Mel. She did have an after-school gig, I reasoned with myself. She was busy. She had a life. She didn't need to baby her mother, that wasn't her responsibility. It had nothing to do with me. I wanted my mom. I tried to read, to crochet, to write, all manner of things to keep me occupied, but sitting up for more than a minute was nigh impossible. More often than not, I can't even sit up, just rocking back and forth like a beetle. Daytime television and infomercials most days, or the low chatter of Dr. Maple's radio, firmly set to 70s country, or nothing. Soon enough, most I could do was sleep and drift. I opened my eyes to dark, and closed them to dark looking in the same corner. Occasionally I would open my eyes to a sponge bath, blurry recognition that the water was coming away red. Georgia would pat my forehead dry and murmur quietly, tracing my shin and pinching between my toes until my body gave up again, blissfully unaware. I asked once, only once. Waylaid on my side, Georgia gently pressing into the taut skin of my stomach. When the stethoscope finally cut a retreat, I asked, "Dr. Maples?" I rasped. Georgia barely paused, sharp little fingers scuttling across my stomach, feeling for some secret lump or wrinkle to tell her what she needed to know. "Junie," she warned, glancing up over her glasses. Sensible glasses, thin and rectangular. I laughed before I responded, short, like a cough. Sorry, Georgia." Georgia finally smiled and sat up, stethoscope moved around her neck and looked at me. We had had this argument for longer than Melody was old. This is, sometimes I see blood or something in the water when you, bathe me." I flushed, humiliated at the thought. "Am I? Okay. Is everything going? Dr. Maples was already nodding along, completely at ease. She grinned and shook my leg playfully. "Hun, I would mention if anything went wrong, trust me. You're like my kid, I would kill for you." She winked, as if we were in on some state secret together, before she leaned back to business. However, the bleeding is completely normal, launching into increasingly vulgar details of my who-sit and how it was affecting my what-sit until I was green in the gills. Stop, oh my good lord stop I squealed. "I don't want to know." "Forget what I asked," she chirped and tittered, amused. Conversations are now few and far between, if they happen at all. I was tired. God, was I tired. Melody, when not at school or working, was in her room futzing around. I don't blame her now for avoiding me, what with how angry I had been, how scared. However, in the moment I held a selfish fury. My husband was a fucking ghost, now my own daughter won't even look at me? I was never good at keeping anger alive, but this fire was smoldering and dense, pinning me in my sweltering prison just as well belonging to the parasite inside of me. I went into labor out of nowhere at the beginning of the 3rd trimester. My core contracted all at once, bullying my stomach, intestines, and bladder out of the way to make room for the violent stone weighing in my uterus. The pain was blinding and deep, barely a pain and more a pinpoint of burning pressure and mindless fear. The sensation was not unlike boiling water, so scalding that, for a moment, your hand is frozen solid. I grunted and jackknifed before collapsing back into the puddle of discharge below me. My water had broken and in the same moment, a deep ache began in the center of my back. Pressure building outwards until something inside me just popped and my hands went cold. The burning pressure moved, short rough spasms. I dared to try and look only to see my stomach shifting and stretching, moving downwards. It was crawling out. I wasn't dilated, nothing was ready and it did not care one fucking lick. Gentle ringing caressed my ears, blocking outside stimulus. I screamed and screamed for the tiny chance I could break through the bells and wake up. My wailing must have alerted the melody as the next time I managed to open my eyes, there was Dr. Maples, perched over me. Her face was placid and blank, every hitch of breath caught her shrewd dark eyes. At my low moan of pain, those empty pinholes melted. Her face was now lined with worry, a pinch in her lips I've never seen before. She sat with me, her cold hands soothing my sweat-lined brow. I was nothing but a stagnant bloated tick at this point. She had the cordless phone to her ear as she shouted at whatever poor soul was on the other end of the line. I registered being rolled over, encouraged to rest on my hands and knees, but, God, it was too much. It was all too much to bear. Helpful was all I managed before awareness was mercifully stripped away with a familiar pinch between my toes. Flashes of the labor, soundless and blurry, are all I have. Flashes of red water and tiny hands, sharp and clinical. I remember seeing my stomach bow outwards, the skin bleeding green-purple-blue, capillary sunburst around my navel, stretching outward as if the skin of my gut was nothing but a thin latex barrier. Any moment the pressure was sure to rupture my stomach, internally disemboweling me. Later, in a green and pink economy hospital room, when the baby was swaddled tight and placed almost forcefully in my trembling arms, I was told it was a boy. 9 pounds, 3 ounces, something called fetal macrosomia. Congratulations, Mom, the nurse chirped happily, oblivious to my mounting dread. You did amazing, barely any stitches for such a large guy. She wiggled her finger in his face, chuckling when his stumpy fingers took a vice-like grip. Her bubbly smile turned to a small grimace as she tried to pry her finger away. I swear tears began forming before the thing decided she was no longer fun and deigned to drop her hand. As my mother complained, and Charlie cooed over the little bundle, I stared. It stared back. Its face was a disgusting shade of pink-white, shriveled and pinched in a scowl. It was streaked in blood and fluid and looked right at me with a shrewd curl of its lip. It had my red hair, and I guess its nose looked like Charlie's. The nurse, Cindy, helped adjust him on my chest, draping a blanket to give me some privacy to feed him. A yelp burst forth as it bit down, tiny teeth sinking into the flesh under it. Shifting didn't dislodge anything as its nails were biting just as harshly into my chest. I went still, revulsed and horrified as it contentedly suckled blood and milk. Mel, who had tucked herself against my side some time ago, spoke up, quiet and thin as if afraid to catch her brother's attention. Do we have to take it home? Lolling my head down, lips catching weakly on the crown of her head in a gentle kiss, I wept.